to do what is right, not what is wrong. And that's the essence of morality, right? And government as a moral force, even when it's a highly immoral government, is still taking a moral position. It's one you may not agree with. We may think it's terrible. But Russia, for example, saying that, no, you will go to jail if you talk about war and call it a war. You and I might consider that immoral. Putin considers it perfectly moral. So, morality is a matter of definitions. But nonetheless, government is a moral force grounded in moral views of the world. And each of these different types of government, whether it's Russia, the Saudi oppression of women, Russian violence against the queer community, the Iranian brutal suppression of the democracy movement, we would consider those things immoral. They all consider them moral, but nonetheless, it's all about morality. And in America, we've had some dark episodes in our history. We've not always, in fact, we've only rarely lived up to our stated basic set of moral principles. That all people are born equal under the law, that power should flow up from the people rather than down from the leaders, that a free press, free speech, and freedom from religion are essential to liberty, and that defending the basic rights of all people to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness is the core function of government. We've had a consensus on these things until now. And now Republicans in the House of Representatives have inserted into their big, beautiful, must-pass trillion-dollar tax break for billionaires legislation a provision that would let the president designate any nonprofit, from Harvard to ACLU to your local Democratic Party, a, quote, terrorist supporting organization. And that, causes them to lose their tax-exempt status, effectively putting them out of business. And who gets to decide that designation? The president. And he gets to do it in secret. This is exactly how both Putin and Orban first destroyed dissent and free speech in Russia and Hungary. Hey, if you're over 50 and experiencing joint stiffness, thinning hair, sagging skin, or brittle nails, there's a critical reason why, and ignoring it could accelerate aging from the inside out. A respected Texas doctor of physical therapy is sounding the alarm on a rapid decline of collagen, a structural protein essential for strong bones, flexible joints, and youthful skin. By age 50, your collagen levels may have dropped by over 50%, be vulnerable to pain, weakness, and visible signs of aging. That's why millions have turned to his breakthrough formula, Native Path Collagen, to restore what time takes away. This isn't just another generic supplement. This is a clinically supported, bioavailable collagen peptide that's helping men and women significantly strengthen bones and reduce joint pain, visibly reduce wrinkles and sagging skin, boost hair fullness and reverse nail damage, improve cellulite appearance, and feel real results in as little as 14 days. And right now, as a Thom Hartmann listener, you can claim up to 45% off, but only for a limited time at getnativepath.com/Hartmann. With over 5 million jars sold and with over 8,000 five-star reviews and a 365-day money-back guarantee, this is your moment to take control of aging before symptoms get worse. Go to getnativepath.com/Hartmann now. Supplies are limited and demand is surging. Trump has been pushing this for a decade. From his trying to designate Antifa as a terrorist organization, to his attacks on universities, to his use of Stalin's phrase, enemy of the people, to describe the press. We have seen in America, if you look at the arc of the entire country, we have seen major reformations. The biggest ones have occurred about every 80 years. Obviously, the first one we broke from England. The second one after the Civil War, we had Reconstruction and the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments that, gave humanity and citizenship to non-white people, or recognized, embraced the humanity of non-white people. That was the first one after the Civil War. The second was during the Republican Great Depression, when FDR rebooted our republic and became, basically our government became the supporter of last resort for the working class, which produced the world's first, more than half of us, middle class. We're down below half right now because of Reaganomics, but we were there for a while. Almost 2/3 of us were in the middle class when Reagan was sworn into office. And now Trump and Musk and their cabal of right-wing billionaires are trying to dissolve virtually all of this, replacing our democracy with this illiberal democracy like we see in Russia and Hungary, where there are still elections, but their outcome is predetermined. There are still protections for the press and free speech, but only when that speech doesn't challenge those in power. And only the wealthy can truly buy safety and security. You know, after the Saudi, Emirati, and Qatari governments each gave the Trump family massive gifts in the form of billion-dollar development and Trump hotel and golf course licensing deals, Trump made a speech in which he abandoned our 250-year history of advocating democracy around the world. You know, this is not something new. We've often failed in our mission in the past, but these, you know, for example, Reagan was, you know, supporting the death squads in Central America. That still haunts our southern border. Eisenhower's embrace of the Shah still rattles the Middle East. Nixon's tolerance of Chinese brutality led us in the name of capitalism to help that nation's communist leaders create the most powerful and really medieval surveillance state in the history of the world. But these exceptions, where we essentially supported these anti-democratic nations, these exceptions actually prove the rule. When we abandon our own stated principles, you know, like supporting the Shah, it backfires on us. It blows up in our face. The results are almost uniformly bad for us, for them, and for democracy around the world. And it becomes even more destructive when this administration rejects American values as it embraces bribes from foreign dictators, as it harasses journalists, as it imprisons op-ed writers, and as it threatens judges. Harry Truman was pretty explicit about this back in 1952. He said, "I stand for honest government. To me, morality in government means more than a mere absence of wrongdoing. It means a government that is fair to all. I think it's just as immoral for Congress to enact special tax favors into law as it is for tax officials to connive at a crooked tax return. It is just as immoral to use the lawmaking power of government to enrich the few at the expense of the many as it is to steal money from the public treasury." That is stealing money from the public treasury. And then Harry Truman, when he was president, it was 1952, he says, "Legislation that favored the greed of monopoly and the trickery of Wall Street was a form of corruption that did our country 4 times as much harm as Teapot Dome ever did. Private, selfish interests are always trying to corrupt the government in this way. Powerful financial groups are always trying to get favors for themselves." End of quote. And here we are. And Donald Trump, of course, does not share Harry Truman's worldview. I mean, Fred Trump raised Donald. Fred, you know, built a real estate empire through racism, fraud, and deceit. And he raised Donald to view every transaction as necessarily win-lose. Every rule or regulation is something to get around. And every government official is somebody to be influenced with either threats or money. I mean, Robert Reich laid this out in his brilliant Substack, robertreich.substack.com. Yesterday, he said, "But starting with Reagan, America went off the rails. Deregulation, privatization, free trade, wild gambling by Wall Street, union busting, record levels of inequality, near stagnant wages for most, staggering wealth for the few, big money taking over our politics. Stock buybacks and the well-being of investors became more important than good jobs with good wages, and corporate profits became more important than the common good." End of quote. Greed is a type of... In addition to bringing you the Thom Hartmann Program here on Free Speech TV and Video Media Online, we also have a whole set of ways you can interact with us and tools you can use to spread the word about the importance of democracy and the threats to it in our republic. First, there's your daily homework. Sue Nethercutt puts together a daily email newsletter that has a link to every story I discuss on the air, so you can find my sources and you can share them with your friends. It's free and you can sign up at thomhartmann.com. Second, I publish my daily take every day over at the hartmannreport.com website. That's also free if you want the daily 5 days a week rant in your inbox. No ads either. Third, we have the podcasts. There's the free 1-hour version of our daily show that's advertising supported. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts normally. And then there's also the podcast of the entire 3-hour show with no advertisements, and that's available by subscription over at thomhartmann.com. So check them all out at thomhartmann.com and hartmannreport.com.
We say fight back! Thom Hartmann book report today, or book club today, is Cuban Women Confront the Future. It's an interview with Vilma Espin. Vilma Espin was the president of the Federation of Cuban Women since its founding in 1960, and chair of the Commission for Social Prevention, and president of the Infancy Institute and the International Federation of Democratic Women. And it's a long-form interview, actually, the book. So the first question: what does socialism mean in the lives of a Cuban family, and in particular Cuban woman? Vilma Espin. For the Cuban family, especially the woman, socialism has meant an enormous improvement to the quality of life and personal development. We should remember that until January 1st, 1959, in our country, hunger, poverty, exploitation, repression, and dependence reigned. The revolution opened up new horizons in the economic, political, and social fields, and amongst its key principles is the defense of equal rights for all human beings. The constant struggle to make ends meet disappeared, and with it the antagonism between people competing for the crumbs that could help them escape the tragic destiny that awaited the majority. Thus the family, the basic cell of society, could develop in a rounded way. Our revolution assured all Cubans the chance to exercise each one of their inalienable rights. Each citizen is assured that food prices are reasonable and that education and medical services are free. The state makes a systemic effort to improve living standards to the extent that it is permitted by the tense battle for development that we wage under blockade and constant imperialist threats. Child care facilities have been created to provide care for the children of tens of thousands of working women from the age of 3 months to 6 years. Services to lighten domestic work have been created. Hundreds of thousands of students have also received free lunch at day school and all their meals at boarding school. Hundreds of thousands of workers also receive their meals at a moderate price in their workplace. More industrial laundries and dry cleaners have been established, and more domestic labor-saving devices are available with preference in acquisition and cheaper prices for workers. Huge resources are dedicated to housing construction in urban and rural zones. We also try to guarantee recreational facilities and spiritual enjoyment to all the population. Of course, the possibilities are exciting, but also what we have achieved to date, considering our limitations, is already vastly superior to what families experienced in the past. Social Security provides an income for those who cannot work. As far as women are concerned, equal rights have certainly changed their position in the family and in society. A woman's participation in social production, because it implies her financial independence, has altered her dependent position in the marriage and allowed a change in her ideas, in the way she looks at life. The laws that govern family relations, such as the Family Code, are based on equality and guarantee the right of members of the family to participate in society, to work, study, and to responsibly educate the children in line with our revolutionary principles. This does not mean that we achieved all that we aspire to. We still have problems of a material nature to resolve, which are directly related to our economic development. There is still the need to eliminate backward ideas that some people hold, men and women, with respect to the role that each person should play within the home, the nature of the socialist family and the relationship between a couple, ideas which work against the full participation of women in the building of a new society. Obviously, the economic security guaranteed by both men and women having access to work, free health care, and education, the obvious satisfaction and confidence in oneself that equal opportunity and the chance to fully develop to the extent of one's talents, intelligence, and aptitude offer to each person, the constant motivation and emotional stability that comes from feeling useful, recognized, and dignified as a human being. Everything that socialism has brought to us undoubtedly fulfills the deepest desires of a family, particularly the woman, who until just a quarter century ago was exploited, oppressed, and marginalized in the family and in society. Question: what is the primary concern in Cuba, work or the human being? What place do women occupy within this concern? Vilma Espin. In Cuba, a country that is building socialism, the highest aim is human happiness, based on respect for the fundamental human rights of each person. That includes full social equality to education, health care, work, and professional training, with the chance to employ all of one's faculties to take an active role in society and to help develop that society, to create the material and spiritual basis for a full, harmonious life, where the highest qualities of both men and women flourish. To reach those aspirations requires work, talent, dedication, and willingness from everybody, It requires constant scientific and technological innovation to assure economic and social development. Thus, each member of our society, along with the right to work and all the benefits brought by the revolution, has acquired the duty to help create the economic basis necessary for such advantages. The building of a new society and the fulfillment of new aspirations could not possibly be achieved except on the basis of work and the willingness of the whole population. And the people work with enthusiasm because work is the means for creating wealth and goods for all to enjoy. Work that is free from exploitation does require a new dimension,
the Thom
a quality
Hartmann
that stimulates
Program.
and produces satisfaction. To feel
Top of the Tuesday to you, a little funny moment this morning. Senator Maggie Hassan was interviewing Kristi Noem, the head of the Department of Homeland Security, cabinet official, the chief law enforcement officer for the nation, arguably. And she said, "What is habeas corpus?" And Kristi Noem says, "Habeas corpus is the constitutional right that the president has to be able to remove people from this country." And Senator Hassan says, "No, that's incorrect." And of course it is. You know, habeas corpus is Latin for produce the body, and it basically means that you can't be thrown in jail without a court proceeding, without an opportunity to fight back. And, to have Kristi Noem have no frigging clue what habeas corpus is shocking. It's absolutely shocking. Anyhow, we have a lot to talk about today. In addition to that, the final checkmate, Republicans move to destroy the balance of power. I'm going to get into this, and then Erwin Chemerinsky, distinguished professor of law, dean of the University of California at Berkeley's Law School, is going to be with us at the bottom of the hour for a quick interview about this very issue. This is absolutely shocking what is now in this, big, beautiful billionaire tax cut law or bill that the House is pushing. Also, a huge warning on the loss of freedoms of speech and the press in the United States under Trump. In the second hour of our program, the Trump administration is investigating and charging their political opponents now. And if you're a Venezuelan and here legally, you could still end up in prison or deported. I'll tell you about that. And Trump's no taxes on tips has become instead no health care for restaurant workers. I'll lay out the details to that in the second hour of the program. In the third hour of our program, Donald Trump tries to BS Americans about his phone conversation with Putin, but Russia isn't going to let him get away with it. Yeah. Putin is still playing him like a fiddle. And FEMA is AWOL in tornado-ravaged parts of America. Are we surprised? We'll get into that in the third hour of the program. But to start out, my daily take today over at HartmannReport.com is titled "The Final Checkmate, Republicans Move to Destroy the Balance of Power." And here's how it works. This idea of a three-part government where power is broken into three sections, three different divisions of government: the legislative, the executive, and the judiciary. This idea originated in many ways with the Iroquois Confederacy, and the famed lawyer, late 16th, early 17th, or late 17th, early 18th century lawyer Montesquieu, if I'm correct on the dates there, double check me. But he wrote this famous book called The Something of Laws, The Essence of Laws, or words to that effect. Anyhow, that really animated the founders. I mean, Jefferson and Adams in particular, constantly having conversations about this. Thomas Paine as well, Alexander Hamilton. And Montesquieu's idea was the reason that dictators emerge, even in democratic societies like Greece and Rome, ancient Rome, the reason the dictators emerge is because there are no checks on their power. And so let's create three branches of government, and each one has relatively equal power in terms of their ability to constrain the other two. So Congress can pass laws telling the Supreme Court what they can and cannot vote on and defining their budget. And even defining, when they meet and what they, how many members they have. So Congress can regulate the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court can tell Congress, no, that law that you just passed is unconstitutional. We're going to strike it down. Both those groups can restrain the president. Congress can pass laws saying the president may or may not do a particular thing. You know, can't get rich quick, can't take airplanes, can't, you know, whatever. You know, they can pass laws that have to do with campaign finance and how the president can run or not run for re-election. All these kinds of, how many terms the president can have. So Congress can regulate the president. And the Supreme Court can enforce those regulations against the president. And in fact, the entire federal court system can. And then, of course, the president has the power to have oversight over Congress. If he thinks somebody in Congress is doing something wrong, he has the police power of the nation. He can have them investigated or arrested, as we just saw with this representative in I believe it was in Maryland. And the president also has, with regard to the Supreme Court, you know, some say in as much as the president has to nominate Supreme Court justices. They all have to pass through the Article II branch to become the Article III or become members of the Article III branch. So here we have three branches of government that check each other. Keep in mind, you have to have all three checking each other functionally to not end up with a dictatorship. So here's what's happened. Congress has completely surrendered, or at least Republicans in Congress have completely surrendered their power to President Trump. So they are no longer checking Trump, regardless of how bad his impulses may be. Which means that the only limit to Trump's power right now is the courts. That's it. I mean, you could argue that the press plays some role, but not really. I mean, the press is designed to inform us, but it really doesn't have power. And so what they have now put into this new, big, beautiful billionaire tax cut bill is this just absolutely insane quote, which says, and this is the law, it says, or the proposed law, this is the amendment to the big, brutal bill. No court of the United States may use appropriated funds, see, this is the Congress using its power of the purse, may use appropriated funds to enforce a contempt citation for failure to comply with an injunction or temporary restraining order if no security was given when the injunction or order was issued. Now, what this means, let's say that the ACLU decides to sue the Trump administration for, you know, violating our civil rights. What this says is if the ACLU does not put up a bond when they make that lawsuit, then, and the judge rules in favor of the ACLU, and Trump refuses to follow or even acknowledge the court's order, as is largely what's happening right now with the Supreme Court's order that Kilmar Garcia be brought back to the United States, a 9-0 ruling. The only way that the court system can enforce their rulings is through the power of what's called contempt of court. They can hold the individual lawyer who is arguing on behalf of Donald Trump in contempt and throw his or her, you know, butt in jail. They can hit them with fines that get progressively greater and greater and greater. This is the only way that the courts can enforce their orders. Otherwise, it's just moral persuasion. Now, the kicker is that when you sue the administration for violation of civil rights laws or violations of, habeas corpus or whatever it may be, nobody ever puts up bond. There are thousands of these lawsuits, or hundreds of these lawsuits, certainly that are, you know, high visibility versions of it, against the Trump administration right now. There's not a bond involved in a single one. So what this means is that if the courts, basically what it means is that the administration is free to ignore the courts, and the courts can't enforce their actions with a contempt of court citation. Dr. Chemerinsky, who, as I mentioned, will be a guest on the program at the bottom of the hour, he said, he wrote yesterday on the Just Security blog, he said, without this contempt power, judicial orders are meaningless and can be ignored. There's no way to understand this except as a way to keep the Trump administration from being restrained when it violates the Constitution or otherwise breaks the law. This would be a stunning restriction on the power of the federal courts. The Supreme Court has long recognized that the contempt power is integral to the authority of the federal courts. Without the ability to enforce judicial orders, they are rendered mere advisory opinions which parties are free to disregard. He says this is an effort by the Trump administration to negate one of the few checks that exist on its power. This is just over the top. And this is right now in this legislation that the House is voting on today and that, they're going to be sending to the Senate. It is time to call your members of the House and Senate and tell them to stop this, this piece of this law that would eliminate federal court's ability to hold the administration in contempt of court. 202-224-3121 is the phone number for members of Congress. It's for the Congressional Switchboard. Give them a call and let them know what you're thinking. If we don't, we should all be practicing our Heil Trump salutes like Elon does.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
16 minutes past the hour, back with more of the news of the day and your calls in just a moment. And welcome back. Ziggy and Odie out in New York. Hey, Ziggy, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. I just wanted to call about the Moody's downgrade of the American debt. And if you remember right, on March 14th, I called in and said that it was inevitable that it was going to happen.
Yep.
And it did.
Yep.
My surprise is the reaction or the lack of reaction. And it really kind of has me mystified. And I'm agreeing with what Larry said on Friday, that something's not right. You had the bond market and the dollar right on the edge of going. And, the stock market just shrugs off 100 years of this bond rating like it was nothing.
Well, it did drive up the 10-year Treasury yield, which drove up mortgage rates. Mortgage rates just peaked at 7.01% this morning, the highest they've been in a long time. I don't recall exactly how long.
Oh, yeah. But I would have expected the stock market to drop considerably on this news.
Yeah.
That's what I thought. And it makes me kind of think, and kind of like what Larry was talking about, but from a different angle, I think it might have to do with the market makers are now not humans like they were 15 years ago when this kind of thing happened.
I think they're bots.
And they're bots.
Yeah.
And as you already know, they can make massive amounts of trades in a second to manipulate the price.
Yep. Yeah, there's a lot of that going on. But it's largely controlled by a handful of companies who can be physically near the New York Stock Exchange.
Yeah, I know. I still say that we're on the precipice of this thing really dropping at some point.
Yeah.
It almost seems inevitable. I'm just surprised that there wasn't a bigger reaction to it, Yeah. That's my thought,
I get it. And I share your concern or your surprise. Ziggy, thank you. Excellent point. And
take care.
Profit. Paul in Zillow, Washington. Hey, Paul. Thanks for listening to KBCS. What's on your mind today?
Well, good morning, Tom. Last week in the discussion of shipping people off in lack of due process, you said we should be glad they're not loading people in cattle cars. I'd like to point out they actually are. We don't ship cattle much by train anymore. They go on trucks and boats, and surprising number go on airplanes. And in my view,
really?
The sending of yeah, especially the show horses of billionaires' daughters.
Oh, yeah. Well, I get that, but,
But breeding stock, the animals going to slaughter don't go on planes, but breeding stock, other things do. Surprising amount of poultry moves around the country on airplanes.
Huh.
But my view is those people sent down to El Salvador to the concentration camp were loaded in cattle cars and shipped.
Yeah, it's the modern version, certainly.
Exactly. So, no, we shouldn't be grateful that they're not shipping us off in cattle cars because they are.
Yeah. Functionally, it's really remarkable, and now the Republicans are putting into this tax cut legislation, a provision that would allow the administration to completely ignore court orders that they return these people. I mean, it's just this is This is really, really dangerous stuff for our democracy, Paul.
That's right. That's why we need to get 1 in 28 people on the street protesting.
There you go, 3.5%. Paul, thank you. Thank you, spot on. 20 minutes past the hour. I'll be back with you in 60 seconds. Stick around. We'll be right back. Change starts with you. You can be calling your Democratic or Republican representatives to let them know what you think by calling 202-224-3121. It's the Capitol switchboard. It'll get you right through to them. So MAGA Mike and the Republicans want a religious test for people running for public office. They want to know that you are sufficiently Christian to be worthy of being elected. Right. MAGA Mike is one of these 7 mountain evangelicals. There are 7 domains where these dominionists believe that we need to have religion completely take them over. Education, religion, family, business, government, military, arts and entertainment, and the media. Seriously. This is not what Jesus was preaching when he said, give unto Caesar what is Caesar and unto God what is God's. This is the opposite, in fact, of what Jesus was teaching. It's the opposite of Matthew 25, where Jesus said the only way to get to heaven is by feeding the hungry, healing the sick, helping the poor. This is counter-Christian, anti-Christian, in fact. In fact, I think you could say it is the Antichrist's work. There's a piece about it over at HartmannReport.com. Check it out.
The crown came down in silence, not a shot or scream was heard. No breaking news, no marching boots, just a line buried in a word. 3 branches turned to tinder, and the match was struck with stealth, while billionaires bought silence and democracy was shelved. This is the final checkmate. The king stands all alone. No court, no law, no balance left, just marble turned to stone. They sold the soul of justice for a tax cut and a throne. This is the final checkmate, and the tyrant's taken home. The judges cry contempt, but the gavel hits the air. No chains, no jail, no justice left, just darkness draped in care. The House has bowed and yielded, the Senate sealed its fate, while freedom's ghost walks restless through a rusting White House gate. Raise your voice or raise your chains. History forgets the tame. This is not some distant war. It's right here at our door. This is the final checkmate, where silence is the crime. The Constitution bleeding ink, erased in real time. They crown the man who mocks the law and strip the courts of might. This is the final checkmate. Now stand or lose the fight. So call the halls of power, shout through every gate, before we learn too late, too late.
Welcome back.
This is the final checkmate.
There you go, the final checkmate. Welcome back. 25 minutes past the hour, and let's pick up a call here, and then we'll, because Erwin Chemerinsky is coming up next. Jessica in Chicago. Hey, Jessica, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. I am just so thankful for you, Rachel, and Lawrence for giving us the real news. Thank you. Thank you. Tom, I was blown away watching Rachel and the corruption of Kushner and Don Jr.
Yeah.
They think they have the power to do anything they want in another country. The Syrians didn't let Trump Jr. and Kushner get away with it. They wanted to go in there and tear down a historical monument that the people kept.
Yeah, that was Serbia, not Syria. Syria, the way that the former terrorist Al-Qaeda leader who now runs Syria, the way that he, and soldiers, the way he got Trump to suck up to him is he's offering him a Trump Tower in Damascus. But back to Serbia. Yes.
So they kept the building in Serbia, and it was bombed in the 90s by
NATO.
NATO. And so here's the thing. Kushner had a historian write a government form that said they could tear it down. And Serbian monuments.
That's okay. I can finish it for you. It's a forgery. I mean, it's just insane, isn't it, Jessica?
The guy's in prison.
Yeah. It's a forgery that is allowing Don Jr. and Donald to build this property on this historic site in Serbia. It's insane. Jessica, thank you for the call. Dr. Chemerinsky is up next. Stick around.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
You're going to want to hear what the dean of the UC Berkeley Law School has to say about the sticker.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is Until I Am Free, Fannie Lou Hamer's Enduring Message to America.
Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is by P.E. Moskowitz. It's The Case Against Free Speech, the First Amendment, Fascism, and the Future of Dissent. This is from the introduction. This book is not anti-free speech. It is anti the concept of free speech. It's an important distinction. Everyone should have the right to say what they want. I will not argue otherwise. I am not an authoritarian. In this book, I will not argue that the United States should adopt laws banning racist speech like the ones that have proliferated throughout Europe, for example. I think those laws are often counterproductive and end up being used against leftists instead of against racists. I won't argue that Nazi speech should be outlawed as it is in Germany. I won't argue that the First Amendment should be reformed nor more firmly upheld. This book is not about whether the First Amendment is good or bad. This book is about why the First Amendment is nearly irrelevant, except in its power as a propaganda tool. In the following chapters, I will argue that free speech as a concept is meaningless, that it is a dialectical smokescreen more than an ideal to be upheld, that in a grossly unequal society, in which a few corporations control the means of media dissemination and a small group of the ultra-wealthy bankroll entire political movements, there can be no meaningful definition of free speech. On paper, I'm free to speak as a billionaire. I am as free to speak as a billionaire. Yet I do not have the power to change laws through political donations, to influence college curricula, or to quash entire movements for economic liberation. And still, I hold more speech power than most. I am a published author, and my speech is sanctified by the gatekeepers of my publishing house. Therefore, the path to free speech, I will argue, has less to do with a law about speech, or many laws, than with ending racism and inequality. Throughout U.S. history, disparate groups have claimed to cherish free speech more than their enemies. Unionists in the 1920s saw free speech as synonymous with striking and ultimately class revolution. Today, conservatives are the group to most often shroud their politics in free speech, arguing that any silencing or protesting of their speech runs counter to U.S. values of freedom and liberty for all. But as I hope to prove in this book, free speech has never really existed because freedom and liberty have never really existed for the vast majority of Americans. Instead, the U.S. has systematically acted against those values, suppressing the opportunities, speech, movements, and actions of the masses, especially people of color and anti-capitalists, in order to favor the free flow of capital to the owning class. This oppression and suppression have been constant since the founding of this country, and therefore free speech is a hollow signifier, pointing to a past that never existed. The funny thing about free speech is that it's been used to fight for and against these liberties, both as a guise for the wealthy and powerful to oppress the poor, like the Koch brothers and their supporters using free speech to push through anti-democratic legislation and rip apart campaign finance laws, and as a rhetorical tool for the working class to further their cause, as happened in the early 1900s when leftists argued that free speech includes the freedom to riot, and the ACLU argued it was the only way to prevent a violent revolution. I don't argue that one definition of free speech is more legitimate than the other, but that they are all relatively empty signifiers, hiding more tangible structures of power and ideas underneath them. So why write a book on free speech if I think the term is essentially meaningless? Because the concept holds so much weight in our country. We argue endlessly about whether it's being trampled on, whether college students hate it, whether the government is adequately upholding it, but we rarely ask what free speech is, or how we got to the free speech crisis we supposedly face today. When you scratch the surface of conversations over free speech, you find more difficult issues underneath. It's much easier to talk about the ability of conservatives to speak on college campuses than about the systemic racism, sexism, and transphobia college students experience. And those are the things that students who protest campus visits by right-wing conservatives are actually fighting against. It's easier to fantasize about a country that values free speech than to grapple with the fact that we place so much emphasis on free speech while jailing dissidents and allowing tens of millions to live in poverty. What is free speech to someone who works 60 hours a week and has no time nor any platform to use their supposed right? There is relatively little literature and philosophy on free speech, despite the fact that it has been in constant contention since the founding of this country. Even the legal history of the First Amendment is sparse for something so foundational to the values of our country. A few have seriously grappled with ideas of what free speech does and does not mean, most notably literary theorist Stanley Fish, who has argued that the term does not mean much at all. Leftists like Noam Chomsky have written about free speech tangentially in their explorations of media as a propaganda tool. Most history books on speech are written as hagiographies, unquestioning the intent of the Founding Fathers and their morals, with a few notable exceptions, such as Laura Weintraub's The Taming of Free Speech. I don't intend to fill the yawning gap of research history and philosophy. This is not a definitive account of free speech, but a necessary intervention, prodding us to be more critical of the term, and maybe along with it, of the other lofty concepts we must hold near and dear. The case against free speech.
Did you know that every weekday we send out an email before the show giving you all the topics coming up so you can be fully informed and ready to interact with our program? Or that after the show we send out Sue's Stack, a list of every topic I've discussed along with clickable hot links to every source of information I've shared with you on the air? It's all completely free and available over at thom.tv, THOM.tv. Check it out. Welcome back. 34 minutes past the hour. On the line with us is the Dean and Jesse H. Chopra Distinguished Professor of Law at the University of California, Dean of the Berkeley Law School, author of over 20 books, including his latest, No Democracy Lasts Forever, How the Constitution Threatens the United States, which was published last year. He's authored over 200 law review articles, a frequent contributor to op-ed pages in major newspapers. UC Berkeley Law at bluesky.social is his Blue Sky handle. Professor Erwin Chemerinsky. Professor, welcome back to the program. It's been a while since we've spoken, and I'm so glad you could be with us today.
It has. Truly my pleasure to talk with you.
Thank you. I was shocked by your article that was published at justsecurity.org yesterday and cited it in my own rant this morning. Let's start at the beginning. The original idea of the founders was that there would be three branches of government that would have the ability to check the power of each other in order to avoid the rise of a dictator. This was the big innovation of America back in the 1770s. You want to speak to that and the importance right now of, now that particularly that Congress has surrendered, or at least Republicans in Congress have surrendered all their oversight power to Donald Trump, that the courts stand in that breach?
The framers of the Constitution were deeply distrustful of executive power. They believed, as you just said, in separation of powers and checks and balances. James Madison, in Federalist Paper number 10, said, and I quote, "The accumulation of all powers, executive, legislative, and judicial, in the same hands is the very definition of tyranny." Alexander Hamilton, in Federalist number 78, talked about the importance of judicial review. The words in the Constitution are meaningless unless they're enforced, and we need the courts there to enforce them.
So the mechanism of enforcement, I mean, Congress can, pull money from the president or from the Supreme Court, Article 3, Section 2. They can even regulate, not just regulate the court, but arguably define what the court can rule on. The court has the power to, and they can oversee the executive branch as well. And investigate it and all kinds of things. The Supreme Court and all the inferior federal courts, the only power, my understanding is, the only way that they can actually enforce their decisions is through the power of contempt of court. Can you fill us in on that? Explain that.
The courts don't have, in the words of Alexander Hamilton, the power of the sword. They don't have a military to enforce their orders. They don't have the power of the purse. And so what they do have is contempt power. Courts can issue orders, and if anyone violates those orders, they can be held in contempt of court. There's criminal contempt that has criminal penalties. There's civil contempt where somebody's fined or put in jail until they comply with a court order. But without the contempt power, courts are really rendered powerless.
So here we have a Congress that has already surrendered its power to Donald Trump, and the court system that is sort of holding the line here. The Supreme Court, for example, has said that Mr. Garcia must be returned to the United States 9-0, and that's, the administration's ignoring that. So the only power the court has to enforce this is contempt. And along come the Republicans in the House of Representatives and say, we're going to blow that up too?
They put a provision into the large budget bill that says, in essence, that federal courts cannot use their contempt power in any case if a bond was not required with regard to a temporary restraining order, a preliminary injunction, or an injunction. And this applies to all court orders that have ever been issued. So generally, courts don't require bonds when there's constitutional cases against the United States government. It doesn't make sense to require Abrego Garcia to post a monetary bond to be able to come into federal court. But what this would say is to the order in that case, and every order in a school desegregation case, prison reform case, antitrust case that's ever been issued, it is from now on unenforceable by contempt if the judge at the time didn't require a bond. And as I said, bonds almost never have been required in suits against the United States.
And the way contempt would work, generally speaking, right now, and I'm not an attorney, but my understanding is that a judge could start with the lawyer who's standing in front of them, say the Trump administration lawyer who's defending their refusal to bring back Mr. Garcia, and hold that person in contempt and throw them in jail or fine them with progressively greater fines. And then they could reach beyond that even. And is it possible that they could even hold the administration itself in contempt or even the president in contempt?
Likely they can't hold the president in contempt because in 1982, the Supreme Court said that presidents can't be held civilly liable for that they do in discharging the duties of the office. And last July, the Supreme Court said a president can't be held criminally liable for official acts. But anybody else who violates a court order can be held in contempt. Agencies can, and at times have been held in contempt. And so what this would do is say no court orders against the federal government, against any level of government, against anyone could be enforced by contempt unless a monetary bond had been required. This would make all of the orders that have ever been issued unenforceable.
Wow. And tell me if I'm overstating this. Without congressional oversight and without the ability of the courts to enforce their own orders, it seems to me that we're left with one of these three branches of government essentially holding all the power, the police power, basically all the power, and that would be the president. Doesn't this, in essence, turn Donald Trump into a dictator?
It's not coincidental that Republicans are trying to limit the judicial check on the president at the same time that Donald Trump is claiming unprecedented executive authority. If the president can violate the Constitution and there's no court that can enforce an order against him, then you really do have a dictatorship. There's no limits on what the individual can do.
This is deeply shocking. And this is in this legislation that these guys are promoting. Why do you think it is that, to the best of my knowledge, you're the first person to have sounded the alarm on this, and there seems to be no interest among the American press in this. What's it going to take? Why would it be that this is just being treated like, it's just another little provision in the law?
I'm not the first person to sound the alarm. Others have recognized it. I think in answer to your question, some of it seems to be about a technical issue concerning civil procedure. It involves applying a particular rule of the federal rules of civil procedure. Some of it is that it's a small provision in an extremely large budget bill. Now, my hope is if it passes the House, and obviously I hope it won't, but then when it gets to the Senate parliamentarian will say that this isn't about budget at all. It therefore isn't properly in a budget reconciliation bill, which would mean it would then be subject to a Senate filibuster.
Oh, interesting. And so that would be, if we're reaching out to our senators, that would be something to encourage.
Well, I think what we most need to do is what you're doing, publicizing this so that people understand that it's there and the consequences of it. Again, the idea would be that this gets stripped out of the budget bill in the House. But if it goes to the Senate, then the next most important thing will hopefully be the parliamentarian of the Senate will make a ruling on whether this is a budget matter. If it's not a budget matter, then it's not part of the reconciliation bill, and then it's subject to a Senate filibuster. The thing about it being a reconciliation is that reconciliation bills under the so-called Byrd rule are not subject to a filibuster.
Right. But although they can only last for 10 years. My recollection, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, is that during the last Trump term, the parliamentarian in the House refused to go along with some provision of some law that the Trumpies wanted, and they've replaced that person. They fired her, as I recall. To what extent is the parliamentarian in the Senate subject to political pressure? How hopeful are you that this person will be able to maintain their independence and strip this out of this legislation?
I'm very hopeful. I mean, the parliamentarians have traditionally been politically independent. There's a benefit to the Congress in having people make those procedural rulings who aren't making them for political reasons. Obviously, we're seeing so many unprecedented things. We could see an effort here to try to undermine the independence of the parliamentarian. But at this point, for this bill, I think that may be our best hope.
Yeah. We're speaking with Professor Erwin Chemerinsky, the Dean of the University of California, Berkeley School of Law, and author of more than 20 books. Any final thoughts on this?
Let me tie this together with something that was heard in the Supreme Court last week, and that's whether federal courts can continue to issue nationwide injunctions. Notice that what the Trump administration is trying to do is lessen the power of the federal courts to be a check, eliminating the ability of a federal court to issue a nationwide injunction, make it much harder to check the president. Limiting the ability of a federal court to enforce its orders by contempt would limit a check on the president. And I think at a time we're seeing a president claiming such unprecedented authority, we should be very wary of lessening the few checks that exist on the president, the few ways we have of enforcing the guardrails of democracy.
Yeah, amen. Professor Erwin Chemerinsky, distinguished professor of law at the University of California, Berkeley School of Law since 2017, and the dean, author of more than 20 books. No Democracy Lasts Forever, his most recent. Professor Chemerinsky, thank you so much for dropping by. It's great seeing you again.
Thank you for having me. It's always great to be with you.
Thank you. I'll be back with more of the news of the day and your calls in just a moment. Stay tuned. It's 45 minutes past the hour.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Defending America from the weapons of mass deception. I'll be right back with your calls. And welcome back. Janice in Bellevue, Washington. Hey, Janice, thanks for listening to KBCS. What's on your mind today?
Hi. I just wanted to tell you that you probably know about the plunge protection team. When there's a Moody's rating that goes through the floor or something and they want to put the stock market back up, they do this phony stuff through the plunge protection team. It's in Ellen Brown's Web of Debt book.
Yeah, I'm familiar with it.
Book. Okay. Another would be nice if you could do a little research on it and put that out to people. Also, when you ask us or, advise us to call in to our representatives, it would be really good if you could give the number of the name of the bill. And I understand this one with the bond and contempt and injunction and all that.
This is part of Trump's big, beautiful bill. That's all you need. It's his tax bill.
Again?
It's Trump is calling this his big, beautiful bill. It's the tax legislation, the tax break legislation. That's all you need.
Right, I understand that. But when we call into their offices, the young people or the people who are answering the phones, they don't know what we're talking about. So I was wondering if there's anything that we could tell them that would quickly alert them to what we want.
I guarantee you, Janice, there's not a single person working on Capitol Hill who doesn't know that the tax legislation or the big, beautiful bill is what it is and that this is part of it. Janice, thanks for the call. Don in Pittsburgh, Kansas. Hey, Don, what's on your mind today?
Oh, hi. I was wondering, have you ever heard of Whitney Webb?
I've not.
She's a journalist. She actually lives in southern Chile. She's an expert on sexual blackmail. She's followed a lot of cases. She wrote a book where she went back to the 20s, the teens, and the 20s and looked at how organized crime used it, and all intelligence agencies use it. And I just would recommend it. People just look her up, Whitney, W-H-I-T-N-E-Y, W-E-B-B.
How does that relate to this moment? How does that relate?
How does that relate to this moment?
Yeah.
Well, when you look at people who maybe ought to vote something, you would think, well, maybe they could vote against the big, beautiful tax bill because their constituents would be harmed. And then, they never do it. Well, a lot of them are pressured in standard ways, but some of them are being pressured these ways. And the Israelis, and, come on, that's really going crazy right now. They're big users of this. And,
all right.
And, and of course, remember, who's the guy that they couldn't use this on? Ralph Nader. Ralph Nader's so honest, and he's so smart. He's loyal. He's faithful to his wife. He's too smart to take the bait on money. And they did everything they could to suborn him, and he never went for it. He has his flaws, but
so do you know of any members of Congress who are being sexually blackmailed right now?
I don't know them specifically.
Yeah.
But and it's not just Congress. This is whenever they want to exercise control, and they find people are in the way, this is something they use. She looked at the Epstein. The Epstein was in the news again recently.
Yeah.
And he was given an apartment in New York from the guy who owned Victoria's Secret, who was also a sexual blackmailer.
Yeah.
And all the bedrooms and everything were wired with video cameras and everything.
Yeah, I understand that there's a lot of movies, of videos that are in the Epstein collection that Kristi Noem is refusing to release, or maybe it's Pam Blondie. Don, thanks for the call. 10 minutes before the hour, I'll be right back with more of your calls in just a moment. Stay tuned. Hey, thanks so much for sharing our program and for reaching out to our stations and sponsors and letting them know that you're listening. It really means a lot to us. So we have this major culture war going on in the United States. You've got Republicans trying to ban abortion. They're trying to ban books. Not just trying to, they're actually doing all of these things. Banning books, banning trans girls in sports, attacking basically the entire queer community. Whatever they can to try to sow division and hate, promoting Nazi memes, talking about how, Jews are paying to have black and brown people replace white people and all this kind of stuff. Why are billionaires doing this? Why are they funding these people? I mean, billionaires don't care about crime. They live in gated communities with private security. They don't care about public schools. Their kids go to private schools. They don't care about public transportation. They fly in private jets. Oh, yeah, that's right. If they can get us fighting against each other, if they can get us hating each other, we will ignore their efforts to cut their taxes and deregulate their industries. There's a whole video about it at tom.tv. Check it out. Welcome back. 9 minutes before the hour. Picking up your calls here. What's on your mind? Paul in Woodinville, Washington. Hey, Paul, what's up?
Tom, it's been 40 years since we've had an immigration bill. And
yeah, 80, what was it? 86 was the last one?
I think it was 86. And in that 40 years, immigration has become the central political topic. And yet here we go again. All of this crap that the Republican Congress has essentially just abstained from assuming its powers. And they're passing tax cuts again, but no immigration bill. Trump's first term, he had a Republican Congress, no immigration bill. John Boehner said that they didn't pass an immigration bill when Congress was Republican when Obama was in there because they didn't trust them to enforce it. And I was saying, well, what the hell is their problem now? Yeah. They got Trump. Yeah. Okay,
I'm not sure you'd want the immigration bill that they'd come up with, but Paul, you always call in about legal issues here, and you're well educated in that realm. I'm curious your take on what Professor Chemerinsky had to say about this tax bill having a provision that would literally turn Donald Trump into a dictator.
Yeah, what I was thinking about was when he was saying that is I had a biography of Albert Einstein, and he became an American citizen, and he had a friend, another Swiss scientist who came in the 1950s, and the night before his citizenship hearing, he was telling Einstein, Albert, this Constitution, I think it's a recipe for despotism. And the book didn't say why he thought that. And I was like, and I can't remember who it was, and I don't have the book anymore, but I really wanted to know why he thought that, because really smart people can read things and say, I see a problem here. And yeah, this is it. And you're right. The courts are being just basically, well, J.D. Vance said, ignore the courts. And now the Congress is willing to do this, is to stuff this, and it's going to be in there because this is a writer or a stuffer that they can put in, and they can pass this with reconciliation too.
Yeah. Well, right? Maybe. I mean, that's Chemerinsky's big hope, is that the Senate parliamentarian will say this has nothing to do with budgets. The problem is that the provision says that no appropriated funds may be used. In other words, it references appropriated funds in the first words of the provision. So I think it's probably going to make it through, but we'll see. Paul, thanks for the call.
Yeah.
It's always nice hearing from you. I appreciate it. Tom in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Hey, Tom, what's on your mind today? Tom in Pittsburgh, listening on Sirius XM. Going once, going twice. Jim in Auburn, New York. Hey, Jim, what's on your mind today?
Yeah, I called you recently about Trump not using FEMA, wants to defund it, and the recent storms down in Kentucky where people are dying and it's a mess, and he hasn't given them any help. Also, when I was in Florida, like about 10 years ago, they went over with the sea levels rising. Florida's going to be underwater. What do you think the future of the South and the country looks like if we don't figure out a way to fix this global warming?
Yeah, it's going to, there's absolutely no doubt about it that these severe storms are going to get worse and worse and worse. The warmer the atmosphere, the more moisture the atmosphere can hold, the more moisture it has, and the more heat it has. The more the heat is a form of energy, the more energy it has. That not only drives the ferocity of the storms. I mean, that one tornado in Kentucky yesterday was a mile wide. I grew up in the Midwest where we had tornadoes every single summer in Michigan, and I don't ever recall a tornado being a mile wide. I mean, they'd be 300 feet wide, and the fact that the air can hold so much more moisture, means that we're going to see many more of these massive flooding events, where you've got these rivers of water in the sky that are just pouring down. So, it seems to me like the worst possible time to gut FEMA. But hey, they got to pay for a tax break for billionaires here. So FEMA's got to go, Jim. This is when we should be yelling and screaming at our elected officials, particularly if you have a Republican.
Well, the thing is, though, how many times can we keep rebuilding and then get it, destroyed again?
Well, eventually, I think it's going to be the insurance market that's going to force, an end to reconstruction, or at least a change in the way construction is done. It is possible to build buildings that are hurricane-proof or tornado-proof, and it is possible to redo buildings in ways that can deal with, other kinds of natural disasters, including earthquakes. Jim, thanks for the call. We'll be back on the other side of the break. The Trump administration investigating and charging political opponents now.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
In addition to bringing you the Thom Hartmann Program here on Free Speech TV and Video Media Online, we also have a whole set of ways you can interact with us and tools you can use to spread the word about the importance of democracy and the threats to it in our republic. First, there's your daily homework. Sue Nethercutt puts together a daily email newsletter that has a link to every story I discuss on the air, so you can find my sources and you can share them with your friends. It's free and you can sign up at thomhartmann.com. Second, I publish my daily take every day over at the hartmannreport.com website. That's also free if you want the daily 5 days a week rant in your inbox. No ads either. Third, we have the podcasts. There's the free 1-hour version of our daily show that's advertising supported. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts normally. And then there's also the podcast of the entire 3-hour show with no advertisements, and that's available by subscription over at thomhartmann.com. So check them all out at thomhartmann.com and hartmannreport.com.
We say fight back!
Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is by Brian J. Karam. It's titled Free the Press, The Death of American Journalism and How to Revive It. This is from the very last chapter, page 265. My father once told me that if you have a complaint, then you'd better have a solution. People bitch about everything, he routinely told me. They seem to like it more than solving problems. I've often thought about that as I spent a career covering the news. It is increasingly popular to merely ignore those things with which we don't agree and treat people the same way. That's hardly a solution. It only creates more problems. My pop also preached to me about adaptability, as did Alan, and that is a lesson I've tried to apply to every part of my life, to adapt. By the time Alan was preaching the same thing, it was a lesson I'd already learned, though it's still much appreciated. Today, the changing media landscape calls for adherence to some of our strictest tenets, while at the same time adapting to how we deliver the news to the public. Our democracy demands it. The local paper is perilously close to completely disappearing. Large swaths of this country live in news deserts. According to a study published by Axios in June 2021, the United States has lost some 37,000 newsroom jobs since 2016. And according to a study released on May 1st, 2021, by the University of North Carolina School of Media and Journalism, more than 1,300 communities across the United States have lost all news coverage. Among the findings in the study, about 20% of all metro and community newspapers in the United States, about 1,800, have gone out of business or merged since 2004, when about 9,000 were being published. Hundreds of more have scaled back coverage so much that they're becoming what researchers call ghost newspapers. Almost all of the newspapers still publishing have also scaled back, just less drastically. Online news sites, as well as some TV newsrooms and cable access channels, are working hard to keep local reporting alive, but these are taking root more slowly than newspapers are dying. Hence the 1,300 communities that have lost all local coverage. To adapt to this undeniable fact, we have to make newspapers more viable and easier to sustain. We cannot afford to let newsrooms disappear because they play a vital role in delivering information that the internet cannot reproduce. When you go to the internet, you're usually on a hard target searching for information. When you pick up a newspaper, you're scanning for information and are open to read anything presented to you. You may not know what to search for, but you know what you want to read when you find it. Newspapers are smorgasbords of information. The internet isn't and cannot be set up that way. So how do we save newspapers? There are a variety of business models currently under consideration. Nonprofits hold promise, but as of yet, we haven't gotten the needed solution or the needed traction. A big push was made to save the Baltimore Sun through a nonprofit, and this may indeed be the best way to save newspapers, since the job they do for society is completely incompatible with capitalism. Quote, "There's no question about it. I don't think any problem facing the country is more severe than what is facing our news information infrastructure," end quote, Michael Copps, formerly of the Federal Communications Commission, told me. Quote, "I saw it. First call I got was from the chairman when I joined the FCC was about the merger of Fox and Chris Kraft. That set the tone. I thought going to the FCC was the coolest job on earth. We'd be serving the public. And then I realized I spent a lot of time meeting with CEOs who wanted to seek approval of their mergers. The FCC more often than not approved the mergers. Then a rival would come in and gripe and say in order to compete, they had to have a merger too," end quote. The free market obviously isn't the answer. It only allows politics and information today to be played and reported on as sport. Walter Cronkite, Dan Rather, and others saw it coming. This is a very steep mountain to climb, and there is no commercial solution to the problem. The corporate consolidation, as Copps told me, is too embedded in the system. How do you get beyond that? The government has to exercise its antitrust laws, and we need to think about public media. Put the brakes on corporate mergers. Subsidies are the key, Victor Picard, the University of Pennsylvania communications professor, explained to me. He works at the intersections of U.S. and global media activities and politics, the history and political economy of media institutions, and the normative foundations of media policy. Quote, "It's the commercialization, the dedication to clickbait, and profits above all else. That's what's driving this. There's no commercial incentive to do it right. Journalism often isn't sexy," end quote, he said. While there isn't one perfect model, Picard said he could see subsidized subscribers or a voucher plan Everybody gets a $100 voucher and they can buy media of their choice. It guarantees a certain method of support, subsidize the news outlets themselves. My preference is to radically expand and reform our public broadcast system so that they can actually be politically independent." End quote. Pickard also supports public media centers in every city across the country, public libraries, schools, and journalism schools. That's my radical plan. It's healthy to have a mixed system: independents, nonprofits, public benefit corporations, and standards for for-profit companies. The driving force today in journalism is capitalism, and it's driving our journalism into the ground. The book is Free the Press: The Death of American Journalism and How to Revive It.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome to the second hour of our program. The there is this. Let me just find the detail here, because this article has PEN without naming exactly what they are. Here, PEN America. That's what it's called. Okay. I thought it was more complicated than that. But anyhow, it's this group that defends free speech rights here in the United States. And they just organized a letter signed by 7 free speech and civil rights organizations, including the ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union, of course, the Committee to Protect Journalists, Reporters Without Borders, the Knight First Amendment Institute at Columbia University kind of helped pull this thing together. And the letter calls for universities, media organizations, law firms, and businesses to, quote, "stand together in defense of the freedoms of speech and the press that are integral to our democracy." They note, and again I quote, "In a little more than 100 days, President Trump and the agencies under his control have threatened First Amendment rights through a breathtaking array of actions. They have sought to control speech and association by imposing unconstitutional conditions on a wide range of federal grantees and contractors." And they're asking people not to bend the knee, right? They cite the example of the Associated Press being kicked out of the White House press room, which I believe is still the case, because the Associated Press refuses to call it the Gulf of America. Jamil Jaffer is the executive director of the Knight First Amendment Institute. He says, "First Amendment freedoms will wither if institutional leaders don't assert and defend themselves." Gee, you think? I mean, this is a moment that is absolutely crucial in America. Trump now again threatening to sue CBS, threatening to defund NPR, taking One America News, which is a right-wing propaganda outlet, and having their content being programmed onto Radio Liberty and Radio Free, Voice of America, and all these, Radio Free fill in the blanks, Radio Free Asia, whatever. This is just nuts. I mean, we're watching our free speech rights under attack at the same time these massive propaganda machines funded by billionaires like Rupert Murdoch are just spewing, hate and poison constantly in an effort to basically destroy America, in my opinion, or at least destroy the traditions of America. And so, these folks are saying enough, and I'm with them. Enough. Meanwhile, the Justice Department is now investigating the mayor of Chicago, Brandon Johnson. The mayor, what did the mayor do that was wrong that led to this? Well, the mayor gave a speech in a church, in a black church, in which he basically bragged that he'd hired a lot of, here's the phrase. He said, "Our administration is one of the most diverse administrations in the history of Chicago." And it is. It's 45% black, 25% brown, 8% Asian, 30% white. And so now he's being sued by the Justice Department. This is the third, by the way, attack on the mayor of Chicago by the Trump administration. They're suing him right now for hiring too many black people. They're saying he violated the Civil Rights Act because he was hiring people based on their race. And the fact that he went into this black church and talked about it or bragged about it according to them, is that he's engaging in racial discrimination. They're also suing him for the sanctuary city policies that forbid the Chicago Police Department from participating with ICE in these raids. And the Chicago Public Schools are being investigated right now for alleged anti-Semitism, which we all know is the code word for not being sufficiently supportive of Benjamin Netanyahu's assault on Gaza. And hanging in the balance, $3.5 billion in federal grants that go to the city of Chicago every year. And that's a pretty damn big incentive. I mean, this is astonishing, frankly, that this administration is saying you're hiring too many black people and we're going to prosecute you for it. In this country, I mean, black people control 15% of black people control 15% of the wealth that white people control in the United States, and that's, you know, adjusted for proportion in population. This, of course, is historic. I mean, you know, black people were locked out of, and many brown people as well, locked out of economic opportunity, locked out of job opportunities for centuries. And, you know, government hiring is one of the few places where there has been not just essentially no discrimination in hiring, but arguably some efforts to remediate that situation. I just find this astonishing that the Trump administration's new thing is we're going to look around the country for Democratic elected officials who have hired too many black people, and we're going to try to prosecute them. How can you not acknowledge how insanely racist this policy is of the Trump administration to go after these people? Meanwhile, LaMonica McIver, a black congresswoman, has been charged. This is I don't recall another member of Congress being charged. I mean, yeah, you know, Senator Menendez was just busted for bribery, but that was just good old-fashioned corruption. I mean, his mistake was that he wasn't doing real estate. He was taking gold bars and Mercedes. But LaMonica McIver was at that detention center in New Jersey. I said Maryland earlier, it was in New Jersey. And the interim U.S. attorney for New Jersey is Alina Habba, who is Trump's former lawyer, and then before that she was the lawyer for parking garages. And she's charging this member of Congress with trespassing. And what is fascinating about this is that, number one, members of Congress have, by law, the right to walk into any federal facility anywhere in the country anytime. They don't even need permission. So, number one, she was in the right, this member of Congress, Congresswoman McIver. Number two, they don't just have that right. That is their job, is to oversee how money appropriated by Congress is being spent. And number three, this is, in my mind, just a clear attempt to intimidate a member of Congress based on politics. And there is an office in the Department of Justice that is supposed to prevent this from happening. And that office has been largely gutted by the Trump administration. And we don't know if this prosecution was run by that office or not. Apparently not, because I think they would have put the kibosh on this. But House Democratic leaders are just beside themselves around this. They're furious. Hakeem Jeffries, the House Minority Leader, said, and I quote, "The proceeding initiated by the so-called U.S. attorney in New Jersey," by the way, she's acting, she's temporary, "is a blatant attempt by the Trump administration to intimidate Congress and interfere with our ability to serve as a check and balance on an out-of-control executive branch. House Democrats will not be intimidated by the Trump administration. Not today, not ever." But this is what's going on. I mean, this is wild stuff. Meanwhile, the Supreme Court has let Trump designate 350,000, more or less, Venezuelans who are in the United States with legal permission to be here, to designate them as aliens who must be deported or we must get rid of. I'll tell you about that. A court in Texas, what's going on with this, and also Trump's no taxes on tips has become no health care for restaurant workers. Stay with us. 15 minutes past the hour.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Exposing the con in conservative. I'll be right back with you. And welcome back. Jim in Corbett, Oregon. Hey, Jim, what's on your mind today?
Hello, Tom. How are you?
I'm fine. What's up?
I was so frustrated by by the situation that we are living through that I was thinking of, a quick end to this. And a quick end was already set up by Donald Trump with him setting up his parade. There's going to be 6,500 troops there with rifles, okay? And they're going to go before a review stand where he salutes them. And they throw down those 6,500 rifles on the ground and say, "We will not serve you." Okay. And you got 24 hours to leave.
Dream on, Jim.
You don't think? I was an infantryman who served in Vietnam.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of love between the men that are serving there and the officers. I heard this at first from you when Pinochet was thrown out of the country.
Yeah, but that took 17
years. He ordered
years.
his men to shoot civilians.
Yes.
They threw down on him, and he was out of that country in a day.
No, that was an election that got rid of Pinochet. It wasn't a military.
Was it an election? I'm sorry. I thought it was
an election
the army that really
called
forced him out.
Because he thought he had pre-rigged it. But I get it. Jim, thanks for the call. We can dream.
It's not a violent move.
No, I get it. We can dream.
It's a move that after this happened, after these rifles are down there, somebody is going to say something.
Yeah, I think so. Jim, thanks for the call. Tom in Lafayette, Louisiana. Hey, Tom, what's on your mind today?
Oh, hello, Tom. It's nice to talk to you. I wanted to follow up with a quote. You had a quote from Disraeli, from Sam Rayburn, that said that any jackass can kick down a barn, but it takes a skilled carpenter to build a barn.
Yes,
and
it's an old saying.
Yeah, it's a great saying. I love it. But also, I wanted to say that Louisiana is losing the equivalent of 30 football fields of land every day from erosion. So you had an earlier caller talking about that, global warming. But our governor here, Jeff Landry, rather, is a drill guy. So the oil companies, and I also wanted to mention that this thing about Comey with the seashells, that he and his wife. You know this already. I mean, they were just walking along the beach, and he took a picture of it. And I was over at the gym, and they had Fox News on. That's what they have here in Louisiana at the gym. And they were making a big deal out of it. And Tulsi Gabbard actually said that Comey should be jailed for putting that on a social post.
I know.
And it's crazy. I mean, so...
And you can buy Trump merchandise that says 8645. Or 86-46, whatever Biden was. I guess he was 46. So I mean, the Trump people have been saying, 86 Biden for a long time. Not to mention Donald Trump reposting a picture of Joe Biden tied up in the back of a pickup truck with a bullet hole in his head.
Oh, jeez. Yeah. And then, finally, they're also talking about the cover-up that Biden, about his health issues and all that. And I'm thinking all the time they wasted on talking about Hunter's laptop.
Yeah.
And, and the $400 million Qatar gift, it's really just disgusting. But thanks, Tom, for taking my call.
My pleasure, Tom. Good talking to you. Thank you for the call. It's 19 minutes past the hour. I'll be back with you in 60 seconds. Stay with us.
Our daily song is now available on Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, YouTube Music, Pandora, Tidal, Deezer, iHeartRadio, and a whole bunch of other platforms. Just look for songs by Louise and Thom Hartmann. Check it out.
So a lot of people are wondering, why is it in America that we can't have nice things? Why don't we have, the same things every other democracy has? Every other democracy in the world has a national health care system of some form, and everybody is covered. We don't. We've got 27 million uninsured people and over 100 million underinsured people. Why is that? Why is it that every other country in the world offers college education very inexpensively, if not for free, and for here you go to debt? Why is it that we've got our public schools crumbling and other countries are doing well? Why is it that we've got Medicare being taken apart by this Medicare Advantage scam and nobody will do anything about it? Well, it turns out the reason why it boils down to one thing, one Supreme Court decision, Citizens United, legalizing the bribery of our politicians. There's a whole rant about this over at HartmannReport.com. I think you're going to find it very, very useful. Check it out. Welcome back. 21 minutes past the hour. Picking up, actually, before I get to your calls, there's a couple of other stories here that I wanted to cover that I think are pretty important that we all know about. First off, the Supreme Court yesterday ended or allowed the Trump administration to end the temporary protected status that had been given to 348,202 Venezuelans under Joe Biden in 2023. Now, this is not all that surprising because, one president does an executive order that does something, in this case, Biden saying these people can stay here, and then the next president can undo it. It's just, this is how it works. So it shouldn't be shocking that the Supreme Court went along with this, and it's not, necessarily a sign of the court capitulating to the Trump administration or something like that. But this is a significant action. As Alahan Al-Hatram, the co-director of the ACLU Immigration Law Center, said, this is the largest single action stripping any group of non-citizens of immigration status in modern U.S. history. And that the Supreme Court authorized it in a 2-paragraph order with no reasoning is truly shocking. Well, as I said, I don't consider it shocking, but I do think it's tragic. I mean, these people came here legally. They came here with permission. They received temporary protected status. They are fleeing, the horrors. This one TPS holder, Maria Rodriguez, 33, who's lived in Orlando for 5 years with her husband and 2 kids, including a 2-year-old son born in the U.S. who's a U.S. citizen, said, we're defenseless. We're vulnerable. We left Venezuela because we couldn't make ends meet there. There was no work. We have no family left in Venezuela. It's a true drama. This on top of Trump revoking temporary protected status for hundreds of thousands, or thousands anyway, of Afghan citizens who helped us during the Gulf War, who are now going to be deported back to Afghanistan, where they will face almost certain death and torture, and thousands of Cameroonians. And, of course, they went after the Haitians a while ago. So Trump is doing everything he can to deport hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of people of color, specifically, while bringing in white people from South Africa and granting them refugee status. I mean, if this isn't a racial dog whistle, I don't know what is. This is just amazing. And meanwhile, down in El Salvador, the government of Mr. Bukele, President Nayib Bukele, has just arrested the top civil rights lawyer in that country. Ruth Lopez is a critic of the president, and she was trying to work with the imprisoned Venezuelan migrants who we deported, and the police just arrested her. They said that back a decade ago when she was working for a city government, she embezzled some money. They have not offered any evidence of that, and she has been disappeared. This is the organization she works with, Cristosal, said neither her family nor her legal team has managed to find out her whereabouts. They said that this is a blatant violation of due process and that it, quote, raises serious concerns about the increasing risks faced by human rights defenders in El Salvador. Bukele, of course, calls himself the world's coolest dictator. And Cristobal said last month, the organization said last month the police officers had entered its headquarters during a press conference to film and photograph the premises, as well as members of the media and vehicles belonging to the staff. This was an attempt at intimidation. And then last week, 9 international organizations, including Amnesty International, accused the Bukele administration, quote, of adopting an authoritarian pattern in the face of social discontent. They said the Salvadoran government has resorted to excessive use of force, undue militarization, the criminalization of protest, and threats to further restrict civic space. The BBC, by the way, Ms. Lopez, the lawyer who has now been disappeared in El Salvador by the government, was listed as one of the 100 inspiring and influential women around the world identified by the BBC. Incredible. Meanwhile, another federal judge gave Trump a deadline of tomorrow afternoon, Wednesday afternoon, to facilitate a contact between a different Venezuelan man. This is Widmer Sanguino. He's 24 years old. He's a Venezuelan. This judge out of Texas, Judge Keith Ellison out of Texas, no relation to Minnesota's Keith Ellison, gave the federal government 24 hours to confirm the location of Mr. Sanguinino and 48 hours to, quote, restore and help maintain attorney-client communication. And the Trump administration, of course, is going to appeal this order. Previously, they had ordered the federal government to facilitate the return of Kilmar Garcia, this Maryland father who was wrongly deported. So here we have, this is another federal judge saying, Trump, what you and Kristi Noem, who doesn't know what due process is, who doesn't know what habeas corpus is, which is breathtaking. I mean, I never went to law school. I don't think Kristi Noem did either, frankly. I'm pretty sure she's not a lawyer. But I know what habeas corpus is. I would think anybody with anybody who's ever taken a high school civics course would know what habeas corpus is. But here we've got multiple courts now trying to hold the Trump administration accountable at the same time that Republicans in the House of Representatives are trying to strip the courts of their ability to use the contempt citation to force the Trump administration to behave right.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
This is truly amazing. I'll be back with your calls on the other side of the break. Stay with us.
Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from the crash of 2016, one of my favorites. In her writings, this is from page 62, by the way, a middle-class primer is the chapter title. In her writings, which have become foundational for libertarian theology, author Ayn Rand suggested that the only purpose of government should be to prevent oppression by force. What she neglected to consider was all the force inherent in nature. If you're hungry, there is the force of biology. If you're homeless, you confront the force of winds, storms, ice, and rain. If you're sick, you confront the ravages and force of disease. These were the forces that provoked the first governments, the first communities, the first clans and tribes, the first nation states. It's easy for libertarian elitists, such as multimillionaire TV talking heads or college kids reading Atlas Shrugged, to talk about how there should be no government beyond police, the army, and the courts. They all have enough resources that they don't need to deal with the forces of raw nature. And that explains why billionaires would bankroll libertarian-leaning think tanks that will, when the crash comes with its full force, tell us it was caused by big government. However, in the real world, humans must confront both nature and other humans, which is why we create governments and why we create economies. But it wasn't until 1776, when Thomas Jefferson placed John Locke's right to life, liberty, and property, or replaced it, with life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that the idea of a large class of working people have the ability to pursue happiness, the middle class. It wasn't until 1776 that was even seriously considered as a cornerstone obligation to government. This is also the first time in history that the word happiness had ever appeared in any nation's formative documents, as Jefferson wrote in 1817 to Dr. John Manners, quote, The evidence of this natural right, like that to our right of life, liberty, the use of our faculties, the pursuit of happiness, is not left to the feeble and sophisticated investigations of reason, but is impressed on the sense of every man. As Jefferson realized, with no government interference by setting the rules of the game of business and fair taxation, there could be no broad middle class. Maybe a sliver of small business and artisans, but the vast majority of us would be the working poor under the yoke of elites. The economic royalists know this, which gets to the root of why they set out to destroy government's involvement in the economy. After all, in a middle-class economy, they may have to give up some of their power, and some of the higher end of their wealth may even be redistributed, horrors of horrors, for schools, parks, libraries, and other things that support a healthy middle-class society but are not needed by the rich, who live in a parallel but separate world from the rest of us. As Jefferson laid out in his 1816 letter to Samuel Kercheval, a totally free market where corporations reign supreme, just like the oppressive governments of old, could transform America, quote, until the bulk of the society is reduced to be mere automatons of misery, to have no sensibilities left but for sinning and suffering. Then begins indeed the bella omnium in omnia, which some philosophers, observing to be so general in this world, have mistaken it for the natural instead of the abusive state of man. Although this may come as a sudden realization to many, we've really known it all our lives. In fact, in the 6,000-year history of the civilized world, a middle class emerging in any nation has been such a rarity as to be largely historically invisible. The United States has had two great periods of what we today call a middle class. The first was from the 1700s to the mid-1800s and was fueled by virtually free land for settlers, stolen from the Indians, and free labor, slavery in the South and indentured immigrants in the North. The result was, as de Tocqueville pointed out, the most well-educated, politically active, middle-class non-aristocrats in the world. The second period didn't take hold until after World War II, during my dad's lifetime. Unlike the first, which was fueled by free land and slaves, the second had to be carefully constructed with specific and what some might define as socialist policies put in place during the New Deal, which asserted more democratic control over the economy and workplace in order to keep the economic royalists in check. To both stimulate and balance the domestic economy, FDR reinstituted progressive taxation, which gave workers more to spend and gave the rich an incentive to pay their workers better to maintain a stable workplace, since if they took the money themselves, it would just mostly go to taxes, thus stimulating demand for more goods and services. Progressive taxation has a long history. As Jefferson said in a 1785 letter to James Madison, quote, another means of silently lessening the inequality of property is to exempt from taxation all below a certain point and to tax the higher portions of property in geometrical progression as they rise. FDR eventually hiked the top income tax rate paid by the super rich in America to 90%. This had a twofold effect. First, it held income inequality in check and ushered in an era of equal income and a growth among all classes. Unlike the Gilded Age, when the economy grew at a blistering pace but the gains were afforded only to the robber barons, the period between 1947 and 1980 saw unparalleled equitable growth. During these 30-plus years, the poorest fifth in America saw a 116% increase in their incomes. The middle fifth, 111% increase. Top 5% only saw an 85% increase. All income classes shared in the prosperity of the times when the top marginal income tax rate was above 70%. The second effect of a high income tax rate was to bring stability to the economy. And then it goes through the whole explanation of how that worked. The book is The Crash of 2016.
Share the Thom Hartmann Program with your friends. Our podcast, The Hartmann Report, is absolutely free and available wherever fine podcasts are available. And the entire 3-hour podcast is available over at thomhartmann.com. Back in 2010, when Viktor Orban took over the Fidesz party in Hungary, that party was sort of like the Republican Party. It was just a conventional conservative European political party. And he has turned it into a neo-fascist powerhouse. He pushed through he altered the nation's constitution to push through what we would call gerrymandering and voter suppression so that his party will always win. He campaigned on building a wall. Build a wall was literally one of his campaign slogans, and he did build a wall across the southern border of Hungary to keep out Syrian refugees who were fleeing the violence when Russia was bombing that country. His other two campaign slogans were, and I quote, "Restore Christian purity and make Hungary great again." Seriously, back in 2010, 6 years before Trump. There's an amazing backstory about how Viktor Orban is being cloned, essentially, in the GOP. You can find the article over at HartmannReport.com. Check it out.
There's a game being played in the Capitol halls where billionaires tower and the common folk crawl. They cut through the safety nets we all depend to hand out tax breaks to their billionaire friends. They call it freedom, but the cost's obscene. Trading food for fortunes and hope for a dream. The people's voice grows quiet, the power shifts. Oligarchy rises on the back of their gifts. But this is how oligarchy works, robbing the people while the wealthy smirk. It's the art of the deal, but the price is steep. Sell it on democracy while the billionaires reap.
You know, we use a lot of different words. Welcome back, 35 minutes past the hour. We use a lot of words, different words to describe what's going on in America right now. Oligarchy, autocracy, strongman government, authoritarianism, fascism. The one thing that's common to all of these different descriptions of non-democratic systems of governance is that they are all corrupt. This is a really important point that Rachel Maddow made last night, and it cannot be emphasized enough that these guys are, that these people are about being corrupt. And, you know, we just, if nothing else, that's the message that I think really this is how Zelensky became president of Ukraine. He ran on an anti-corruption campaign. This is how Alexei Navalny almost took down Putin. He started a foundation against corruption in the Russian government. I think that this is the Achilles heel of the Trump administration. I think this is their grand weakness, is their corruption. Their corruption of our courts, their corruption of our legislature, the naked corruption of cutting billion-dollar hotel deals with the countries that Trump, that the president is visiting, all these kind of things. This, in my opinion, is their grand weakness. And Democrats need to be exploiting it. They need to be speaking about Republican corruption and Trump corruption every single day. So what's on your mind? Mario in Chicago. Hey, Mario, what's up?
Thank you very much, Mrs. Thom. I feel privileged being part of this great audience that you have, such intelligent people that called you. I feel very humbled to be part of them. Thom, previous caller, he mentioned about blackmail sex. I do agree my whole life that this is happening in the Senate and in the Congress. They've been blackmailed by Russia. I would say so, putting such a beautiful woman in front of them, especially with a bunch of guys with a very, very small hands, and they don't have a way to talk to a woman, because I knew that. I see that. And I think it's a blackmail. And I witnessed one case, and I say 100%, all these people, they've been blackmailed by Russia, by Trump, because they are the PP tapes and so on. I do believe that happened. Yeah. And that is why we are where we are.
I get it, Mario. I'm more inclined to think that they're being bribed with cash, but, we can all have our opinions. Thanks for the call. Frida in Madison, Wisconsin. Hey, Frida, thanks for listening to 92.7 FM. What's up?
Oh, hi, Tom. First of all, I just wanted to thank you so much for your fabulous program. I learn so much from it every day. It's so important, so thank you so much. I have a two-part question concerning that provision that's hidden in the budget bill saying that the federal courts cannot use the contempt order. I guess my first question is just when we call our representatives, what language or how can we easily and simply refer to this so they know what we're asking for and they're clear, is there a bill number, how to say it? And then the second question is I have a lot of quote unquote Facebook friends, and I just want to post like an article or something and say, hey, read this, educate yourself on this, and act on this now because this is super important.
Right.
So those are my two questions.
Sure. I don't know the bill number. You don't need that. Every member of Congress knows that we're talking about the big, beautiful bill, the tax break bill that's coming through the House right now. I would say there's a provision in this, if I was speaking to a member of Congress, I would say, there's a provision in this bill that strips courts of their ability to use contempt. And, this needs to be removed immediately. That's enough. That's all you need to say. They'll figure it out. They know what you're talking about, generally speaking. I mean, they won't know probably about the contempt provision, but they certainly know what the big, beautiful bill is, or, the big, brutal bill, if you want to use Ro Khanna's language. In terms of an article, I wrote about it this morning at hartmanreport.com. That's free. You get it. You can share it with people. And in my article is a hot link to Professor Chemerinsky's article over at Just Security blog, at the Just Security blog. So those are two options for you. Okay?
Thank you so much. Thanks. Excellent.
Thank you, Frida. Adele in Villa Park, Illinois. Hey, Adele, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. Happy Tuesday in spite of. Tom, asked the same question your previous caller did. That was a perfect sentence, but I missed one word. There's a provision in this bill that strips courts of their ability to what? Contempt?
To use contempt. To use contempt of court.
Okay. And what I've done so far is I'm going to call all 27 states that have Republican governors, and I'm just talking to the person that answers and asking them to, I don't know exactly what to ask them. I know what to say about the provision, but I'm thinking I want to ask them, request the Republican governors to speak to the Republican senators. What's my request, if you could be so kind?
Sure. If you're talking to the office of a Republican governor, it would have to be, please let your senators know, or your member of the House, or your members of the House. My sense of it is that talking to governors, though, is probably not going to be your most productive use of time. I would suggest that you be calling members of the House and Senate, because that's where this is all happening.
Then that's what I'm going to do today.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And it's unlikely that a governor is going to, do something in response to a caller. But legislators are keeping track of this stuff. They are adding it up. Adele, thank you. Thanks for the call, and thanks for listening to WCPT. Andrew in San Francisco. Hey, Andrew, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Speaker. Wait a second. Hi, Tom. I wanted to, James Comey and this 8647. Mm-hmm. I have a kind of a conspiracy theory about what's going on here. Now, if you look at this 8647, of course, the White House came out, oh, he's a criminal being investigated, blah, blah, blah. He's calling for the murder of the president and all that. But he's getting himself on all these news shows pushing a book. I don't know if you listen to the whole interview, but he's pushing a book.
Okay.
Okay.
So this is the best thing that could have happened to him, this publicity.
Exactly. Now, the other part of it that kind of reinforces all of this is that he is quite impactful going back to Hillary's emails.
Yeah, he was largely
in that election.
Yeah, there's a broad consensus, at least among Democrats, that if Comey had not reopened that investigation, 2 or 3 weeks before the election, that Clinton would have become elected in 2016.
Okay, in that case, Trump ended up firing him, I guess, over the Russia conspiracy thing, which was just a way to quiet the thing that, well, maybe he was in cahoots with Trump in the email. It's a cover story. It's to fire him.
Yeah.
Now,
I think Comey made a mistake here. I mean, yes, he's a lifelong Republican. Maybe he intended to screw Hillary Clinton. My sense of it at the time was that it was just a mistake.
These two things look so, oh, well, forget it. Yeah. All right. Thank you, Tom.
I get your point. Andrew, thank you for the call, and thanks for watching us there on Free Speech TV. It's 44 and a half minutes past the hour. I'll be back with more of your calls on the other side of this break. Stay with us. It's the Thom Hartmann Program. 202-808-9925 is our number, and I'll be right back with you. Stay tuned.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Taking back the mainstream media 3 hours a day, 5 days a week, right here. I'll be right back with your calls. And welcome back, Alfredo in Mountain View, California. Hey, Alfredo, what's on your mind today? Happy Tuesday.
Hi, Tom. Can you hear me?
Yeah, just fine.
Yeah. So regarding this $400 million plane bribe that Trump is getting from the Saudis, Trump said that he was going to donate that plane to the Trump Library or something like that. And the reason why he's doing that, and correct me if I'm wrong, is because he wants taxpayers to foot the bill for maintaining that plane. And that's my question.
Yeah. My take on it is that this will be the sequence, assuming that this thing actually happens. Number one, he wants the plane to go to the Defense Department. So yes, the Defense Department will pay for retrofitting it, for upgrading it, for maintenance, for fueling it, for everything. Then at the end of his term, after it's been all upgraded and we've put $1 billion into it and it's all spiffy and fancy, the plane is donated to the Trump Library Foundation. Now, the foundation, I mean, to the best of my knowledge, Trump doesn't even have a building for a Trump library. So the foundation will then reach out to people like, Tim Cook at Apple, who handed him $1 million check for his inauguration, and say, wouldn't you like to make a donation to the library? And of course, these libraries raise millions and in some cases tens or hundreds of millions of dollars. And those donations from the captains of industry and the right-wing billionaires to the library will then be used to pay for the fuel and the maintenance and upkeep and the staffing of the jet when Trump flies it around after he leaves the White House, or his sons, for that matter, because he'll be 81 when that happens.
Yeah, what a scam. Anyway, thank you, Tom. Thank you for everything.
Yeah, my pleasure. Good talking to you, Alfredo. Thank you. Carol in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. Hey, Carol, what's on your mind today?
Hello, Tom. It's I never gotten through to you so quickly. I'm like off guard.
I think summer has started because our calls are lightening up a little bit. So.
Oh my gosh! Just when you need them more urgent than ever. Hey, on that contempt issue, I just wanted to help a lot of the callers because they're waking up to this and need help with it. First thing I do, I've been doing this since I don't know what the name dictator got in the first time. So I know what to do. When you call, first you definitely want to try and leave a message, even if you can't get somebody who takes your phone call with a key speaker's Jeffries. And then you definitely want to talk to Speaker Schumer. It doesn't matter. I just call them both Speaker. Yeah. And then if they don't answer the phone, they usually don't. The person who answers, get their name. It's important. They ask for your name. Get their name. And then ask if they can deliver an urgent message to Senator Schumer. In my case this morning, I called Senator Whitehouse because he's on it all the time in terms of law and order and stuff like that. But anyway, so ask for the person who's answering the phone name. If you don't get a name and you said leave a message and say at the top, urgent. This is very urgent. The big, beautiful, belligerent, billionaire bill is awful in all aspects. But on top of it all is this major one having to do with contempt, and you must guard that does not get through. Otherwise, he's a full-fledged dictator.
Yeah.
That's what I had to say.
Perfect. Carol, thank you. Well done. 49 minutes past the hour. I'll be right back with you. Stay tuned. Hey, thanks so much for sharing our program and for reaching out to our stations and sponsors and letting them know that you're listening. It really means a lot to us. There is a long history of right-wing, conservative, Republican-appointed Supreme Court justices becoming liberals, or at least becoming reasonable. Earl Warren is probably the best-known example. He was, a right-wing governor of California. He was a hard-ass Alameda County prosecutor, a district attorney, and when Eisenhower put him on the court, a year later he did the Brown versus Brown v. Board of Education case. He ended discrimination, racial discrimination in schools, or at least tried to end it. So why are Republican billionaires now sucking up to conservative members of the Supreme Court? In my opinion, it's not a quid pro quo. They're not trying to get specific votes on specific issues. They're trying to prevent them from doing what Earl Warren did, which is waking up and voting for the benefit of America rather than just their patrons. There's a whole piece about this over at HartmannReport.com. Check it out.
They walk in suits, heads held high, on private jets they touch the sky. Big oil CEOs, their profits swell, while Earth descends into a fiery hell. Their hands hold fortunes, their hearts hold lies, ignoring the flux, the smoke-filled skies. They knew the risks, they knew the score, yet chose the profits and waged this war. The climate killer CEOs, with every deal the damage grows. They poison seas, they scorched the land and left destruction in their hands. The truth was clear, they turned away, and now the world begins to pay.
51 minutes past the hour. Welcome back. Picking up your calls here. Bob in Fredericksburg, Virginia. Hey, Bob, what's up? Thanks for listening to Sirius XM.
Hey, Tom. I hear a lot about people saying that Trump can do whatever he wants, like he can ignore the federal courts, he can ignore the Supreme Court, and there doesn't seem to be anything anybody can do about it because, the Department of Justice is pretty much his administration. I don't know why a federal judge or a Supreme Court can't disbar Pam Bondi or White House attorneys or somebody, that's supposed to be taking action. And that's my question. I don't know if you know.
I'm not an attorney. I don't know how the disbarment process works. I don't know if it's done by courts or by the Bar Association, which oversees the certification of attorneys.
Well, it would be Pam Bondi's job to move forward with a direct order from the courts. And if she's just ignoring it and stalling, it seems to me that she could be disbarred for that.
Yeah, I saw there was an op-ed. There was an op-ed. I think it was on Daily Kos a couple of days ago. I might be wrong. It might have been over on Raw's Story. That was some op-ed writer calling, and might have even been Dean Obeidallah, calling for Pam Bondi's law license to be pulled, which essentially is what you're talking about here, Bob. And I get it. I don't think that would prevent her from doing her job as Attorney General. I don't think that you have to have a law license.
There doesn't seem to be any consequences. So what else can you do other than something drastic like that?
Yeah, well, I mean, what you can do over the short term is push back in every way possible. I mean, there's legal challenges, there's legislative challenges, there's the media. Lots and lots of opportunities to be speaking out on these things. But yeah, it's a tough one. There's an interesting conversation over on Daily Kos. I posted my op-ed there today, and people are like, well, if you can't have contempt of court unless there's a bond, why don't courts just start routinely setting bond at $1? And yeah, that would be a workaround for the future. But basically, what this provision would do is it would end all of the court orders up until this point, and any going forward that aren't done in that way. So it could be a real mess. Bob, thanks for the call. Steve in Northeast Illinois. Hey, Steve, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom, I was just wondering if, say, Democrats get power back and passing a law or to enable the courts to enforce their rulings independent of the Attorney General, a carve out of an existing law, an existing, like U.S. Marshals or something like that, have a special unit designated to enforcing the court's rulings.
Well, that's the executive branch's job. I mean, the Article 2 says that the president shall make sure that the laws are faithfully executed. That's the exact language. And the laws are defined by the courts. So, the executive branch is the one responsible for that. The executive branch also controls the U.S. Marshal Service, which is what the courts typically use to enforce things, the federal courts anyway, use to enforce things like contempt proceedings. So...
Well, I'm speaking just of a special unit,
Yeah.
somehow to be able to, in these cases, I mean, what are you going to do? The Attorney General's not enforcing the laws, so...
Right.
I don't know.
I think it's a safe bet that something like that would not pass through a Republican-controlled legislature. That's a conversation to have 3 years from now if Democrats can take back the White House, the House, and the Senate, which I think there's a good chance of, assuming that we're still having legal and fair elections. ChatGPT now, if you ask it, is America still a democracy? At least according to a post over on Democratic Underground this morning, says, no, America is no longer a democracy. It's basically a corporate-run autocracy or oligarchy. And this is what Jimmy Carter said on this program 7-8 years ago, that America is now an oligarchy, because of Citizens United, with basically unlimited political bribery. So yeah, Steve, I get it. I don't think that there's any easy answer here other than, continuing to fight this thing in the courts and continuing to try to wake up the legislature and the American people. I mean, people like Ro Khanna doing these town halls all over the country. This is good and important stuff. So, Steve, thanks for the call. Great to hear from you. On the other side of this break, Trump tries to BS Americans about his phone conversation with Putin. But Russia isn't going along with it. And FEMA is AWOL in tornado-ravaged cities. That and your calls at 202-808-9925. We'll be back on the other side of this break. Stay tuned.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
In addition to bringing you the Thom Hartmann Program here on Free Speech TV and Video Media Online, we also have a whole set of ways you can interact with us and tools you can use to spread the word about the importance of democracy and the threats to it in our republic. First, there's your daily homework. Sue Nethercutt puts together a daily email newsletter that has a link to every story I discuss on the air, so you can find my sources and you can share them with your friends. It's free and you can sign up at thomhartmann.com. Second, I publish my daily take every day over at the hartmannreport.com website. That's also free if you want the daily 5 days a week rant in your inbox. No ads either. Third, we have the podcasts. There's the free 1-hour version of our daily show that's advertising supported. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts normally. And then there's also the podcast of the entire 3-hour show with no advertisements, and that's available by subscription over at thomhartmann.com. So check them all out at thomhartmann.com and hartmannreport.com.
We say fight back!
And welcome to the Thom Hartmann Book Club, Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from Tears We Cannot Stop, A Sermon to White America by Michael Eric Dyson, who was a guest on our program a while back. This is from page 86. One of the great privileges of whiteness is not to see color, not to see race, and not to pay a price for ignoring it, except, of course, when you're called on it. But even then, the price pales quite literally in comparison to the high price black folk pay for being black. We pay a price, too, for not even being able to derive recognition and financial reward for the styles that make the world want to be black so bad that they don't mind looking like us as long as they never, ever have to be us. If the appropriators can freely rip off our culture with no consequences, those who revise racial history, the fourth stage of white racial grief, are even less accountable for their deeds. The way of the racial revisionist when it comes to black life and history is simply to rewrite it. Their motto is, it didn't happen that way. There's a flood of writing that tells us that the Civil War wasn't really about slavery, but about an effort to defend states' rights. But, my friend, you've got to put yourself in our place and see the absurdity of such a claim. Defend the rights of states to do what? To enslave blacks. But even here, the irresistible logic of whiteness, that is, irresistible to whites themselves, and to all of us who are subjected to white whim, springs into full action. White American history is so powerful that even when it loses, it wins, at least in skirmishes within whiteness itself. From the right wing, there is the belief that the Civil War was fought over the ability of individual states to beat back a federal government out to impose its will. From the left wing, there's the belief that the Civil War was a conflict between the planter class and the proletariat. In each case, race as the main reason for the war is skillfully rewritten, or really written out. Slavery is rewritten too. Some white Christian apologists contend that black folk needed slavery to save their souls or to rescue their cultures. A contemporary twist on this argument radiates in thinkers like Dinesh D'Souza, who claims that American blacks brought here through slavery are now doing far better than their African kin. Some white critics argue that since blacks sold other blacks into slavery, bondage was a black man's problem, not a white man's burden. But revisionists would much rather describe the dehumanization of black folk as little more than a commercial transaction. It's another way of washing their hands of racial responsibility. The effort to rewrite history surfaces in how Malcolm X is treated in the mainstream. It hardly seems likely that the culture he fought with all his heart could be depended on to grasp his true meaning. Malcolm is often read as an apostle of violence, as a frightful figure consumed by destructive rage. Yet the truth is far more complex, and Malcolm was far more complicated. But isn't the autobiography of Malcolm X so enduringly appealing because it shows Malcolm giving up hatred as a means to racial justice? Now, Malcolm X believed in the liberation of black folk from the mental and psychological chains of white supremacy. He was not committed to nonviolence as a way of life or as a method of social strategy. He believed that such a commitment prevents the full realization of black emancipation. Yet he was not personally violent. As Ossie Davis says in his eulogy, responding to the claim that Malcolm preached hate and was a fanatic and a racist, quote, "Did you even talk to Brother Malcolm? Was he ever himself associated with violence or any public disturbance?" End quote. The rage that flowed in Malcolm's veins was the rage against a force of whiteness that aimed to wash its black kin from the face of the earth. The urge to rewrite black history occasionally gives way to the final stage of white racial grief, which is simply, when it comes to race, dilute it. That is, to argue that black stuff doesn't just plague black folk. To summarize, bad stuff happens to everyone. This argument surfaced in the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina, and that storm certainly hit black folk, but it hit white folk too. This is the sordid version of reverse American exceptionalism. It is the same Me Too impulse that flares in the bitter battle against affirmative action. Beloved, I can't help but notice that affirmative action is the bee in so many of your bonnets. You look around in your classrooms and you think every black person is there because they got an unfair shake from the system. You look at your job and you think that your black coworker got an unjust nod of approval from the powers that be. You never stop to think how the history of whiteness in America is one long scroll of affirmative action. You never stop to think that Babe Ruth never had to play the greatest players of his generation, just the greatest white players. You never stop to think that most of our presidents never rose to the top because they bested the competition just the white competition. White privilege is a self-selecting tool that keeps you from having to compete with the best. The history of white folk gaining access to Harvard, Princeton, or Yale is the history of white folk deciding ahead of the game that you are superior. You argue that slots in school should be reserved for your kin because, after all, they are smarter, more disciplined, better suited, and more deserving than inferior blacks. That's like concluding that the Cleveland Cavaliers can't possibly win the NBA championship because they're down 3-1 to the Golden State Warriors. Throw in the towel and call it a series. But they must play the series to determine the winner. Whiteness is having all the advantages on your side, the referees blowing the whistle for you, the arena packed with only your fans. In fact, whiteness means you never even have to play the game at all, at least not in head-to-head matchups with the talent and skill of black folks. Here's we cannot stop.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome to the third hour of our program. I just wanted to emphasize from my opening rant, my first hour rant, that this provision in the big, beautiful bill and in Trump's tax cuts for billionaires legislation, this provision that would say that basically courts can no longer enforce contempt of court unless somebody has put up a bond. With that single stroke, Trump will have basically crowned himself king. No Congress and no courts can stop him, and even if Congress were to try, it would take the courts to enforce their ability to hold hearings, investigations, subpoenas, laws, and without power of the contempt, the courts will have lost that ability. So just wanted to emphasize that. Meanwhile, Donald Trump promised no taxes on restaurant tips. Actually, he promised no taxes on tips, period. And of course, Wall Street is very excited about that because all these bankers are saying, oh yeah, you know that $1 million a year bonus that I get? Well, that's not a bonus, that's a tip. I'm serious. I mean, you've got a bunch of billionaires and a bunch of very, very wealthy people on Wall Street and in banks and whatnot who are very excited about this provision. But let's just look at the restaurant workers for a moment. Let's just pretend that it's only about restaurant workers. One Fair Wage looked into this, and what they found is that, well, yeah, these restaurant workers may not have to pay taxes on their tips, at least for 4 years. It looks like, by the way, increasingly, it looks like the provisions like no taxes on tips, no taxes on Social Security, if those even make their way into the final bill, will be term limited, or time limited, rather, to just the next couple, 3-4 years. And then after that, they'll go away. So if there's a Democratic president following Trump, that Democratic president will be blamed for the tax on tips and the tax on Social Security going back up, number one. Number two, the tax breaks for people making under millions of dollars, the tax breaks for average working people, those will expire in a couple of years, 3 years more or less. But the tax breaks on billionaires will be there forever, or at least for the full 10 years of the reconciliation legislation. But here's where it gets wild. What One Fair Wage found, this organization, found that 33% of people who work in blue states, they call them fair wage states, states where you have a reasonable minimum wage. 33% of tipped restaurant workers in states like Oregon, where if you work in a restaurant, you get paid the actual minimum wage plus tips. 33% of them are on Medicaid. And in the low wage states, the states that haven't raised the federal minimum wage above $7.25 for their states, in those states, it's 37% of tipped restaurant workers are on Medicaid. And of course, the Trump administration is proposing to strip Medicaid from somewhere between 4 and 14 million Americans. Many of them children, many of them elderly, but many of them the working poor. Tipped workers in restaurants, for example. So, Trump's no taxes on tips has now become no health care for restaurant workers. Meanwhile, Vladimir Putin met with Donald Trump on the telephone yesterday for about 2.5 hours. And, there have been many phone calls between Trump and Putin, apparently, over the last several years, at least according to news reports. And in no case that I can recall did Russia actually provide a readout of the call. Well, they did yesterday. Why would they do that? Because, they want to clarify that what Trump said after the call was complete BS. After the call, Trump said, Putin is going to immediately start negotiating a ceasefire with Ukraine. I got a lot done, right? Yeah. Well, this is what Putin actually says, or what the Russian government, they said Russia will propose and is ready to work with the Ukrainian side on a memorandum concerning a possible future peace treaty. In other words, and then they said, as the possibility of a temporary ceasefire if corresponding agreements are reached. Right. And then they added, and this is mind-boggling, this is what Putin said after the call. He said, at the same time, I want to emphasize that overall Russia's position is clear. Our main objective is to eliminate the root cause of this crisis. Well, what's the root cause of this crisis? The fact that Ukraine is not part of Russia. I mean, Putin gave a 2.5-hour speech on this just a couple of years ago about, we're not invading Ukraine because of NATO. We're not invading Ukraine because we feel threatened. We're invading Ukraine because Ukraine isn't a sovereign nation. It's a Russian state. It's a breakaway state, and we want to bring it back the same way China wants to bring back Taiwan. And we are bringing it back, Putin says. I mean, look at they've taken 1/5 of the country so far. So Trump had said, there's a tremendous opportunity for Russia to create massive amounts of jobs and wealth. Its potential is unlimited. Likewise, Ukraine can be a great beneficiary on trade in the process of rebuilding its countries. Negotiation between Russia and Ukraine will begin immediately. Nah, right. Not so much. In fact, Trump has given the Kremlin a financial out with no accountability. And over the weekend, the day before Trump has this phone call with Putin, they launched their deadliest drone strike so far, killing 11 people in Ukraine. So here we are. Meanwhile, the tornadoes are coming, right? Tornado ravaged Kentucky, Missouri, Virginia. 28 people across these states were killed. Global warming is increasing the heat in the atmosphere, which is energy, which makes weather systems more energetic, which makes storms more violent. And the warmer the air is, the more moisture it can hold. And the more moisture it holds, the more of these rivers of water that you get that produce massive flooding. And, we had mile-wide tornadoes over the weekend in Kentucky. I mentioned earlier, I grew up in Michigan. We had tornadoes every single summer. I mean, it was just, it was part of life. But mile-wide tornadoes? Nah. They would take out a house here and there from time to time. They would, knock down trees and things. But so anyhow, this is going on. Global warming is driving more and more severe weather. And what's the Trump administration's response? They're cutting back on the National Weather Service. In fact, the Weather Service office in Kentucky that warned people typically is not staffed overnight. Now, they did, some of the people working there did show up in the middle of the night on Sunday night so that they could, warn people that this was coming, and God bless them. But the office was officially closed. They were under no obligation to do that. This is just people doing what they felt was the right thing. The St. Louis Missouri Mayor Kara Spencer on MSNBC said, what we need right now is federal assistance. This was apparently the worst tornado hit in the history of St. Louis. And Mayor Spencer says, our city cannot shoulder this alone. The state of Missouri cannot shoulder this alone. This is the whole point of having a government, is to do the things that we can't do individually. When David Koch was running for vice president back in 1980, he made the point that government should just get out of this business of educating people and building roads and doing, and taking care of people during disasters. He wanted FEMA ended. He wanted the EPA ended. He wanted the public schools ended. All these things, the stuff that is Project 2025, basically. And, his argument was, well, rich people can take care of themselves, and they'll, with a little charity, they'll take care of the people around them. And, if we go back to, when millions of Americans are living in poverty, that wasn't so terrible for our grandparents' generation, was it? They survived it. I mean, this is his pitch, essentially. And so, they've gutted FEMA. And again, the mayor of St. Louis, FEMA has not been on the ground, and we have not confirmed assistance from FEMA at this point. And Kristi Noem, the Homeland Security Director, in a social media post about the hurricanes in the Midwest, made no mention of FEMA. Instead said, the government will take a backseat to local efforts. She says, we discussed how while the emergency management is best led by local authorities, let's just dump all those bills on them, because here at the federal level, we've got to gut as much of this government as we can so that we can pay for the tax cuts for our billionaires who put Republicans in office. I mean, it's a nice little scheme, right? Billionaires, Spiff, Clarence Thomas and Sam Alito vote for Citizens United so that billionaires can buy politicians. Billionaires then start buying politicians, and the politicians figure out ways to kick back deregulation and tax breaks to those billionaires. And who's left out in the cold? Who's screwed as a result of this? All of us. You and me. I mean, the rest of us. And that's where we're at now in the United States. Is the gutting of our government to pay for tax cuts for billionaires. And why there isn't like a more widespread revolt against it? Well, I know why. Because Fox News is here. We've got billionaire-owned right-wing media, 3 different billionaire-owned right-wing television networks, billionaire-owned radio stations, billionaire-supported podcasts, Russia-supported podcasts, all of them saying what Trump does is wonderful.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
I mean, they're still promoting trickle-down economics, which, and all that does is produce a nation of peons. 17 minutes past the hour. And welcome back. Mike in Bellevue, Washington. Hey, Mike, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom.
Hey, Mike.
Hello. Hey. See, I was wondering, it's not new news, but like 2 months ago, Chris Murphy from Connecticut, made a speech in front of the Senate where he spelled out all of Trump's, you want to call it, fraud and abuse. And I just thought it was really interesting. I saw it on YouTube.
Yeah.
And,
no, it was a great
everything.
speech. Did you see this morning where Trump said they had a little impromptu press conference as he was going in to meet with the Republicans about their big, beautiful bill. And he said, we're not going to touch Medicare. We're just getting rid of fraud, waste, and abuse. These guys are lying. I mean, it's amazing his nose doesn't grow.
Yeah. It's funny. I like to go on Facebook and read their comments, and how many of the Republicans on there, Trumpies, are still saying that they're not going to touch Medicaid.
Yeah, right.
And they've come right out and said it. I mean, I don't see how they can believe that. Well, I can't.
Yeah, or they're cutting $800 billion out of Medicaid. That's going to hurt. It's going to hurt a lot of people. The thing is that what they're trying to set it up so that those Medicaid cuts don't come into being for 3 years. So Trump will get blamed for them. The next president will get blamed for them. I mean, they're just laying landmines, essentially.
Don't you think he's blaming on Biden?
Well, no, they'll be blaming it on the next president, who will probably be a Democrat, assuming that we still have a republic. So there you go. Mike, I got to move along, but thanks for the call. Jerry in Saginaw, Michigan. Hey, Jerry, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom, going back to that initial topic you talked about in the first hour regarding the budget provision as far as plaintiffs suing the government and the bond.
Yeah.
Well, my question is I'm assuming the court sets the bond.
Correct.
Okay. Would it be up to the discretion of the court and or judge to what that amount would be?
It would be, and they could start sending $1 or $5 bonds. The problem is all of the court orders preceding this are now invalidated.
But
at
it
least
would be
can't
up
be
to the
enforced.
discretion of. It would be up to the discretion of the judge to set a dollar bond.
To the
That would
best
be
of my
possible.
knowledge. Again, fact check this with a lawyer. I'm not an attorney. I haven't been to law school.
Okay. One other thing regarding the National Weather Service, because I live in Michigan and I have a boat, and I'm concerned of small craft warnings. Are they going to be accurate anymore? I mean, there's a lot of people in Michigan that have boats
that
go out on the Great Lakes.
Yep. And
Do you
Wisconsin
have any
and
insight on
Illinois.
that?
Yeah. I don't know. What I do know is that the National Weather Service is not what it was before Trump came into office. I mean, they are closing offices. They're laying people off. They stopped putting weather balloons up, or stopped a percentage of weather balloon launches about, 2 weeks ago? We reported it on it here, which means that the forecast will be less accurate going forward because the weather balloons, measure the wind speed and direction and temperature and humidity at particular altitudes. And that's how we get most of the information that we use to put together our weather between that and Doppler radar. And so, I think it's going to be a wild time here, Jerry. And I think that this ties back into the fossil fuel billionaires who don't want us talking about climate change, and they're pissed off that all these weather reporters keep saying, well, because of climate change, we got this or that. And so they're just trying to shut down the entire conversation. That's my conspiracy theory. Jerry, I got to run, but thanks for the call. 21 minutes past the hour. We'll be right back. Our daily song is now available on Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, YouTube Music, Pandora, Tidal, Deezer, iHeartRadio, and a whole bunch of other platforms. Just look for songs by Louise and Thom Hartmann. Check it out. Did you know that the ancient Roman Republic, which for 480 years was actually a democratic republic before Julius Caesar kind of ended the democracy phase and replaced it with the autocracy phase, that they were brought down by a very small group of very rich people. The richest man in ancient Rome was Marcus Licinius Crassus. He was the richest guy, the billionaire of Rome. And he frankly hated the Roman free bread for all welfare system. It was being paid for with his tax dollars, after all. So him and Pompey the Great and a few other rich guys got together, and they basically crashed Rome. They turned it into an oligarchy and then into a tyranny. And the parallels to what Trump is doing right now are absolutely shocking. There's an article about it over at HartmannReport.com titled "American Caesar: Trump's Path to Power Mirrors Rome's Darkest Days." Check it out. Welcome back. 23 minutes past the hour, and what's on your mind? Let's pick up your calls here. Michael in Falls, Pennsylvania. Hey, Michael, what's up?
Hey, Tom, thanks for taking my call.
My pleasure.
Last December, the SBA was in dire need of more funding.
The Small Business Administration you're talking about.
Yes. You recall the damage the hurricanes did in South Carolina, North Carolina, et cetera. And, of course, the SBA needed money to get those businesses back on their feet.
Right. They typically offer loans.
Yes. And, of course, that's under FEMA. So they passed a bill of, I believe it was $110 million. And Biden signed it into law in December. My question is, does that money disappear when a new administration comes into play?
And I don't believe so. I think, once money is appropriated, it's there until it's spent. What the game that the Trump administration has been playing, though, is called impoundment. This is something that Nixon tried to do back in the day, and the Supreme Court ruled was unconstitutional. But Trump is doing it anyway, which is where he's saying, essentially, the Congress appropriates money, and it's up to the executive branch, me, to spend that money. And therefore, I can choose whether or not to spend it. And according to the Supreme Court, no, you can't choose whether or not to spend it. You have to spend it the way that Congress appropriated it. I mean, you can tweak things a little bit here and there, but basically speaking, you've got to get that money out the door. And this is something that's going to become an increasingly large issue as we go forward, because basically all of these agencies that he's gutting, he's doing it through impoundment, which is unconstitutional, according to the Supreme Court.
Yes, of course, but for months now, you'll hear various Republicans say, well, FEMA's out of money, which it is not out of money if the money does carry over from the past administration. That's my point.
Right, and the second part of that would be if FEMA is out of money, then it's up to Congress to appropriate more money for it.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, you know, it's like either we're going to protect our citizens or we're not.
I know. As I said, though, it was passed in December.
Yeah, okay. Well, I'll take your word for it. Michael, thanks. Thanks for the call. Eric in Mojave, California. Hey, Eric, what's up?
Tom, good afternoon. What do you call it? I just wanted to piggyback a little bit on what Jerry was talking about from Michigan. The Democrats need to start playing the game and fighting hard and just buy a bunch of 86-cent bonds for all these court cases going forward. And, I still think that if I had been Joe Biden, I would have done what Romania did after the 2024 elections, and I would have said, you know what? I don't believe it was real. I don't believe it wasn't fixed. Let's have a recount. Let's have a re-election. And they don't use the power when they have it. They don't play the game to the hilt like the Republicans do. They could have filibustered at least one justice in Trump's last term. Every one of the 48 Democratic senators could have got up there for
I don't
18
believe
hours
you can filibuster
a day for the next, because what Coney Barrett, which one had 3 weeks before the election he got her in?
Yeah, I don't think you can filibuster judges.
Could have done that.
I don't think you can filibuster judges.
You can't filibuster to just stop Congress, stop the Senate from consenting and voting?
I think not. I might be wrong on that. I mean, let's. I'll have to look it up during the break. But
I'm pretty sure that Cory Booker, when he was filibustering, the Senate didn't do anything for 24 hours.
No, they didn't. But that was around legislation. He was speaking to.
Right, but I mean, you could have done that about them even confirming a court justice.
Well, I'm just not sure of that. Let me check during the break, and I'll get back with you. Eric, thank you for the call. And thanks for watching us on Free Speech TV. We'll be right back. It's 27 minutes past the hour. Stay with us.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Exposing the con in conservative. I'll be right back with you. Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is The Recurring Crises of American Democracy, 4 Threats. I think 4 Threats is the actual title, by Susan Bettler and Robert C. Lieberman. And this is from my well-dog-eared copy. I have read this book cover to cover. It's an amazing book. This is from the introduction. When the president used his power to target immigrants, the press, and his political opponents, the sheer overreach of his actions shocked many citizens. Tensions among the nation's political leaders had been escalating for years. Embroiled in one intense conflict after another, both sides had grown increasingly distrustful of each other. Every action by one camp provoked a greater counter-reaction from the other, sometimes straining the limits of the Constitution. Fights and mob violence followed. Leaders of the dominant party grew convinced that their only hope for fixing the government was to do everything possible to weaken their opponents and silence dissent. The president signed into law provisions that made it more difficult for immigrants, who tended to support the opposition, to attain citizenship, and mandated the deportation of those who were deemed dangerous or who came from, quote, hostile, end quote, nations. He then put his pen to a law that would allow for the prosecution of those who openly criticized his administration, such as newspaper publishers. The year just described was not 2017 or 2018. Rather, it was 1798, when President John Adams signed the Alien and Sedition Act. His allies in Congress, the Federalists, argued that these measures were necessary in anticipation of a possible war with France to protect the country from internal spies, subversive elements, and dissent. The Federalists disapproved of immigrants, viewing them as a threat to the purity of our national character. They particularly disliked the Irish, the largest immigrant group, because they largely favored their political opponents, the Republicans, and sympathized with the French. Or as one Federalist congressman put it, there was no need to, quote, invite hordes of wild Irishmen, nor the turbulent and disorderly of all the world, to come here with a basic view to distract our tranquility, end quote. Critics of the new laws raised their voices in protest. The Republicans charged that they amounted to barefaced efforts to weaken their faction, which happened to include most Americans not of English heritage. Two leading Republicans, Thomas Jefferson and James Madison, went so far as to advise state governments to refuse to abide by the Sedition Act, resolving that it was unconstitutional. Political conflicts boiled over into everyday life. Federalists and Republicans often resided in different neighborhoods and attended different churches. Federalists, centered particularly in New England, prized their Anglo-American identity, and even after the Revolution, they retained their affinity for their mother country. Republicans saw themselves as cosmopolitan, cherishing Enlightenment ideals of liberty and equality, and they championed the French Revolution and held disdain for Britain. By 1794, partisans in urban communities were holding separate 4th of July ceremonies. Republicans read aloud the Declaration of Independence, penned by the founder of their party, Thomas Jefferson, as evidence that independence had been their own achievement, while the Federalists offered toasts to their leader, President George Washington. The Republicans viewed themselves as the party of the people. One prominent politician among them chided the Federalists for celebrating not, quote, we the people, but, quote, we the noble, chosen, privileged few, end quote. To many people at the time, the Alien and Sedition Acts bore an unsettling resemblance to the kind of government overreach that spurred them to fight a war for independence just a few decades earlier. The acts comprised 4 laws, 3 of which placed restrictions on immigrants and appeared to be a strategic attempt to shape the electorate by excluding potential voters for the opposition in order to tip the scales of power. The 4th, the Sedition Act, made it illegal to publish, quote, any false, scandalous, and malicious writing or writings against the government of the United States or either House of Congress of the United States with intent to defame or to bring them into contempt or disrepute, end quote. By denying freedom of speech and freedom of the press, it outlawed criticism of the government and deprived citizens of the opportunity to become more fully informed by hearing alternative points of view. The measures gave the president power to exert control over Americans' lives in ways removed from congressional authority and therefore less accountable to popular control. Some state governments outright refused to abide by the new federal law, intensifying divisions. And on the streets, mock violence, the burning of effigies, was swiftly transformed into the genuine article as politically motivated beatings and open brawls proliferated. In one case, on July 27, 1798, Federalists in New York marched up Broadway singing God Save the King just to antagonize the Republicans. The latter responded by singing French Revolutionary songs. Soon the singing contest gave way to violence as fighting ensued. Watching the growing chaos and divisions, Americans of all stripes worried that their experiment in self-government might not survive the decade. They feared that monarchy would reassert itself, aristocracy would replace representative government, or some states might secede from the Union, causing its demise. The early beginnings of democracy in the United States were fragile, even at a time when some of the Constitution's framers themselves held public office. The book, 4 Threats, by Mettler and Lieberman. Help support Progressive Radio. If you're listening to us on a commercial station, call their advertisers and let them know you're listening. If you're listening to us on Pacifica, or one of our many nonprofit stations, please support them when they do their fundraising drives. Thanks for supporting Progressive Talk Radio and tag you're it.
Trump's picked his team, a billionaires club, claiming they're here
to drain the swamps up. But look who's leading, it's all a facade. They're tearing down the nation, leaving its scars. Marco at state, pushing hard lines. Pam at justice, ignoring the signs. They call it greatness, but we all see this ain't a cabinet, it's a travesty. Welcome to Trump's wrecking crew, where the rich get richer and we get screwed. No law, no truth, no democracy, just greed, corruption, and hypocrisy.
Welcome back. People are shocked. Cory Booker just voted to confirm Jared Kushner's dad as a U.S. ambassador to someplace, I think France. Amazing. Cory Booker, really? Cory? And then Donald Trump just was talking to reporters a few minutes ago, and he said, yeah, gas is $1.99 a gallon. Is gas $1.99 a gallon where you live? It's wild stuff. All right, what's on your mind today? Patrick in Chicago. Hey, Patrick, what's up?
Hey, Don, thanks for taking my call. Quick joke. The thing about Republicans in lying, that's why they picked an elephant to be their mascot. The main reason why I'm calling is I wanted
Patrick, what do Republicans have to do, or what do elephants have to do with lies?
Oh, because they have really long noses, so Pinocchio, you know.
Oh, okay. I was thinking the story about their memories, but okay, go for it. So.
Oh, well, yeah, that works too, but they have good memories. Anyway, yeah, so my main point was I wanted to talk about nationalizing the law, because you talk a lot about the commons and how, you know, that should belong to the public. And it seems to me like people, and I don't understand why we have private practices, because that just allows the rich people to buy their way out of lawsuits. And so I'm just wondering if there's something that, like, I don't know about, some reason why the government can't do that. Could they do that? Just shut down all of the law firms and take them over?
Well, if they did, they would be doing it under a form of government that's not what we have. I mean, that's the kind of thing they would do in communist China. But you know, there is a flywheel. There is a counterbalance to the power of big law firms and big money in the law, and that is pro bono work and public defenders. And I've long felt that public defenders are massively underfunded, and that's an area where Democrats should be focusing a whole lot more to more equitably or broadly distribute justice across the United States. You know, a lot of
the pro bono people are kind of the vein that I'm talking about. I wrote about this on my Substack at The Aggressive Progressive, but like, why can't we just like lump all of the lawyers into like a pool that like the defending prosecutors have to both choose from, and then like they can divide any like money that would be made between them, like so that both sides get paid, so you don't have lawyers that are like incentivized to like, you know, study the law and find out how ways around it in order to make, you know, lots and lots of money. Like,
well, if all lawyers were
like
lawyers were government employees, you could do that, but they're not. You're talking about the government inserting itself into a private industry. I mean, you know, if you're an independent lawyer, you are basically an entrepreneur. And so, no, it ain't going to happen, and I'm not sure it would even be a good idea.
One quick other point. Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but isn't the application of all the bond thing, isn't that ex post facto?
Arguably, yeah. The Constitution said, for people who don't know what we're talking about, the Constitution says you can't make laws that reach back into the past and change, you know, that basically criminalize things that in the past were not criminal, and then prosecute people for them based on that moment in the past. You know, I think you could make an ex post facto argument, but again, I'm not an attorney, so mostly what it's just going to do is create chaos. Thank you, Patrick. Victoria in Olympia. Hey, Victoria, what's on your mind today?
Well, I thought you'd be interested. This came over my telephone. Apparently, about half an hour ago, the House Rules Committee struck the text in the big, beautiful bill that would prevent the courts from enforcing contempt.
Oh, it just got removed?
Yep.
Oh, wow.
Well, according to, it came from a rules.house.gov, so I assume it's legit.
That is great. So that means that our pressure campaign is working. That's really good news.
Well, thank God something's working, yes.
Well, thank you for that, Victoria.
Anyway, You bet. So now we can make our telephone calls about other things.
There you go. Well, let me double check this and verify it. But for the moment, I'll take your word for it. Victoria, thank you. By the way, somebody called earlier and said, why don't Democrats filibuster judges? And I said, I don't think you can. And it turns out I was right. In November of 2013, Senate Democrats eliminated the filibuster. This was during the Obama administration because the Republicans were filibustering every one of Obama's judges. So they had a majority, they had more than 50 votes in the Senate, so they just changed the rules and said no filibusters for judges. But you could still filibuster Supreme Court nominees. So in 2017, same deal, Senate Republicans this time changed that rule so that a simple 51 votes could pass, and you can't filibuster Supreme Court nominees either. So filibusters are not allowed around judges, just FYI. All right, back to our calls. Andy in Ashland. Hey, Andy, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. Long-time listener, first-time caller.
Thank you, Andy.
I'm interested in the topic of corruption. There's a great article in the Winter Jacobin magazine. The title of it is A Class in Politics. And they point out that corruption is what we're basically experiencing now is the inevitable result of the reordering of the state-economy relationship, otherwise known as neoliberalism. Mm-hmm. I've been writing op-eds since 2010 with the Citizens United decision in the local newspaper when we had one against neoliberalism, which really reversed the normal order of the free market. Mm-hmm. Creating, as you know, an unofficial alliance between politicians and businessmen. I like what you said earlier. You were talking about corruption, and I think you mentioned some countries that were spoke about corruption and used it as a focus. And I'm wondering what you think about the Democratic Party focusing on that theme of corruption as AMLO did and Scheinbaum did in Mexico. Mm-hmm. And further, why aren't we consulting those people in Mexico? Why doesn't the Democratic Party hire Obrador as a consultant?
Yeah, I'm not sure that they need a consultant on this, but I do agree. The examples that I gave were Zelensky in Ukraine and not just Ukraine, actually. There have been multiple countries now. Alexei Navalny in Russia, of course, with his anti-corruption institution. But there have been multiple countries now where anti-corruption platforms, essentially, have propelled politicians into power. And I think that the Democrats should be calling out Trump's corruption and Kushner's corruption. I think they should be doing it every single day. I think this point that Rachel made last night is, just cannot be emphasized or repeated often enough, which is that autocrats, authoritarians, fascists, whatever you want to call them, they are always corrupt 100% of the time. And that's why they use that autocracy or that power or that authoritarianism to basically, protect their corruption. And, Democrats need to be all over this thing. I mean, we need to bring back William Proxmire's Golden Fleece on steroids and do it. Andy, thanks for the call. John in Bay City. Hey, John, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. Long time listener from Air America.
Oh, yeah.
I got a funny call yesterday as I was walking into my bathroom on my Bluetooth watch about some girl called me and said, gee, we'd love you to call your congressman in New York and tell him to vote for this big, beautiful bill. But my watch was breaking up a little. I didn't quite hear her right. Initially, I thought she was telling me to call this congressman and, tell him not to vote for the bill. And as she's going on and on with this big, beautiful bill, nice young girl. And all of a sudden I said, wait, are you asking me to call my congressman and tell him to vote for the bill? And she says, yes, it's a great bill. And I said, you got to be out of your mind. And I hung up on her.
Good on you, John.
So funny. It was like, Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
And then I thought about it. Gee, if I knew she was doing that, I would have kept her on the phone for like a half an hour or something, so she couldn't call anybody else.
There you go. Yeah.
But,
that's when you start making friends.
I know. But I was just thinking, they must be getting desperate.
I think they are, and it looks like the big beautiful bill did not pass out of the budget committee this morning. They still have.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, I mean, Trump called out Thomas Massey, the right winger from Kentucky who loves to post pictures of his children with AR-15s on social media, for being a grandstander. And Massey is like, "Hey, tough luck. I'm still grandstanding." John, thanks for the call. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
This is going to be interesting, how this thing works out. 45 minutes past the hour. Right back with your calls in just a second. And welcome back. Sally in St. Louisville, Ohio. Hey, Sally, what's on your mind today?
Well, I wanted to talk about this Election Truth Alliance. You had a call here a couple of days ago. A lady called in about it, and I think she was probably more up on it or up to date than I am. But what I wanted to make the point, you had said something to her about were they only doing Pennsylvania. And, of course, I think they're going to end up doing all of the swing states, but they've got to start someplace. And what they have to do to prove it is to be able to do a hand count of the ballots. I mean, we can't go do like Trump did and get everybody all in an uproar over it without the proof.
Yeah.
So, and that's how you would prove.
Well, that's been the problem that I've had up to this point with the Election Truth Alliance is that I keep reading their stuff and forwarding it to Greg Palast, and Greg keeps sending it back to me saying, "Where is the evidence? These are assertions, these are questions, these are, blah de blah." But there is no hard evidence here, and until we have hard evidence, we need to basically take the position that yes, there was election interference. It's called voter suppression. It's called, not counting votes. It's called placebo ballots, provisional ballots. It's called purging people off voting rolls. And that's how Trump won. He purged more than 4 million people off the voting rolls. Most of them, or a huge number of them, in swing states. And, that's what handed him the White House. And that should be enough. I mean, the Democrats need to be fighting that tooth and nail, because this is how Republicans are winning elections now, is by suppressing the vote.
Well, as you said, you can't go by hearsay. And the one thing that what I heard was that they were trying to get it so they could do a hand count, an actual physical count of the physical ballots.
Right.
And the thing is, if this happened, that it was with the votes that happened on Election Day.
Yeah. And you can't, by the way, you can't do hand counts in Georgia because it's they don't have paper ballots.
Well, wherever you can.
Yeah.
Let's put it like that.
Yeah.
I think they have paper ballots in Pennsylvania.
They do.
But the thing is, you had made the point to this lady that I heard the other day that maybe they tried to do it in 2020, and that's why Trump was all in a fluster about it and tried to say that was, that he really won the election.
Yep.
But it didn't work because so many people then were voting by mail and by or early voting because of COVID.
Yeah.
So I think it all needs to be talked about. What you were saying about purging all that, the purging that he did, and not counting stuff and all that. But hopefully they are able to count ballots. Well, they did in Arizona. when in 2020, and even Trump people couldn't find anything.
Yeah, no, I know. Sally, I got to run. Thank you for the call. Yeah, I would like to see some hard evidence. And I'd love to see it, but until then, we can't really make statements on it. Hey, thanks so much for sharing our program and for reaching out to our stations and sponsors and letting them know that you're listening. It really means a lot to us. We're back 10 minutes before the hour. Well, we're starting to see the tariffs now popping up. Walmart is starting to increase prices. Home Depot just announced that they're trying to minimize price increases, but there are some products that they just won't even be buying now that there's a 30% tariff on anything coming from China. So keep your eye on this. I'm guessing that the inflation figures are going to start creeping up. We're already seeing home mortgage rates above 7%. I'm looking at a couple of, the two indicators that I have of the economy are, the number of people who are participating or signing up for paid subscriptions on Substack, which has just flattened and essentially collapsed over the last month. And the companies that choose to advertise on our program, which is also flattened out. And I know that it's not just our program, because the ad agency that sells our program also sells about a dozen other radio programs, some conservatives. And everybody's advertising revenue is off right now. Watch MSNBC or CNN, and you'll see public service announcements for don't drive distracted or don't drive drunk or whatever. And when you see public service announcement like that, those are just filler because they can't sell advertising. And those are all, in my mind, having worked in this industry, having owned two ad agencies, those are early warning signs that a recession is coming. And it's this kind of self-fulfilling prophecy. When business starts pulling back, starts laying off people, stops spending money, people stop spending money, demand drops, the economy starts to collapse. Michael in San Francisco. Hey, Michael, what's on your mind today?
Market. The yields are going
Michael,
up.
your phone is breaking up really badly, and it sounds like you're talking to me from the bathroom or something. I don't know if you're using Bluetooth or something. If you could just use your phone normally.
Yeah. So, is that any better?
Not much, no.
All right. All right, well.
Tell you what, I'm going to put you on hold and you can work it out with Mateo. Michael's on line 5, Mateo. Caleb in Chicago. Hey, Caleb, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom, thanks for taking my call. I called you a few weeks back and I gave you a theory on when the stock market was at its lowest. And I told you what I see is I see Trump bringing the rich to their knees. And I believe right now all he's done is he's just let his foot off his neck for a while. And I just want to pitch a theory to you. I really believe that Trump is just a useful idiot. I believe the rich oligarchs and the people behind this have been searching for someone like him for a long time. And now that they have him, they're using him as long as they can. And I believe that once they get their tax taxes, the tax cut through, destroying our health care, destroying all of our other stuff, he's going to take his foot back off their neck again and prove to him that he's powerful. I mean, I don't know how else to think about this, but we have Clarence Thomas and his wife that were involved in the insurrection. The media doesn't cover what's really happening. I mean, right now they're talking more about Biden's health than the fact that our country is under assault by someone.
Promoting his book. I mean, CNN is protecting.
And either these owners of these media companies are aware, or they just, they are involved in it. I mean, simple things like Sean Duffy goes on TV and talking about planes crashing, blaming Biden, and they can't simply follow up with simple questions and say, but you did lay off, tons and tons of people that you actually need. So I don't really know how. I apologize.
No, it's fine. I thought you were done. This is how authoritarianism works. I mean, Trump threatens reporters. He says, that's a stupid question, get a real job, he said yesterday to a reporter. And what it does is it intimidates reporters. It causes them to be more docile, more domesticated, as it were. And, and that's not a good thing for our country. It's not a good thing for the press. With regard to your analysis of the stock market, my take is a little different. I respect yours, Caleb. But my take is that Trump let his insiders know and we have some evidence of this, by the way, that he was going to announce these tariffs and they were going to crash the market, and those people got out of the market. And then he let them know when it was time to get back in the market. He even put it on Truth Social and said, time to buy into the market. And so if you had bought in when he said buy in, you'd be up, 10, 15% right now? I mean, it's pretty substantial.
Actually, yeah, in some cases, a little bit, quite a bit more.
Yeah.
I mean, they can't even ask Steve Witkoff simple questions like, hey, why is Trump accepting a plane from somebody who funds Hamas? I mean, it's not, I don't even know if you can call it failure. It's choosing to not truly cover what's happening.
I agree. And I think it's because he has succeeded in cowing the press. Caleb, thank you for the call. Tony in Las Vegas. Hey, Tony, what's up?
Oh, not much. Just an incidental kind of small fact that I observed yesterday. I'm a volunteer at the VA here in Nevada, and I'm sitting there a few feet away from the picture of the president, and a workman shows up and removes his picture, drills a bunch of holes in the wall, and adds the picture of J.D. Vance to the wall.
In addition to Trump or instead of Trump?
No, with Trump. Trump's picture, in all the facilities over 60 years I've dealt with, there's been a picture of the president plus whoever's in charge of that department, whether it's the post office or the VA or whatever.
Right.
Now they are adding J.D. Vance's picture. Trump's picture goes up, and on each side is now J.D. Vance and the director of that department.
Oh, interesting.
That's never happened in 60 years.
Did you ask who issued the order that this happened?
It's been issued across the country that J.D. Vance needs.
No, but I mean, did this come
added.
from Pete Hegseth, or did this come from
No, the
Vance's
workman
office?
didn't know exactly. The workman I talked to is going to all the VA facilities to add J.D. Vance's, and apparently in all federal facilities, his picture is now being added.
Right.
On the wall.
Right. The question in my mind is who ordered that?
Yeah, I don't know, but that's why I'm throwing it out to you.
Yeah. Well, maybe somebody knows.
Maybe
somebody can call in and fill us in.
Yeah. It was so upsetting because they've never put up the picture of the vice president.
No, I got it. Tony, maybe something's going on. Maybe this is just, this is what authoritarians do. They slap their picture all over the place. Tony, thank you for the call. Amazing. Thanks so much for being with us today. We'll be back tomorrow, same time, same place. In the meantime, don't forget, democracy is not a spectator sport. It requires all of us, and that includes you. So get out there, get active, tag, you are it. Have a great afternoon. Be good to yourself and the folks around you. Stay safe. Enjoy your day, and I'll catch up with you tomorrow.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.
In addition to bringing you the Thom Hartmann Program here on Free Speech TV and Video Media Online, we also have a whole set of ways you can interact with us and tools you can use to spread the word about the importance of democracy and the threats to it in our republic. First, there's your daily homework. Sue Nethercutt puts together a daily email newsletter that has a link to every story I discuss on the air, so you can find my sources and you can share them with your friends. It's free and you can sign up at thomhartmann.com. Second, I publish my daily take every day over at the hartmannreport.com website. That's also free if you want the daily 5 days a week rant in your inbox. No ads either. Third, we have the podcasts. There's the free 1-hour version of our daily show that's advertising supported. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts normally. And then there's also the podcast of the entire 3-hour show with no advertisements, and that's available by subscription over at thomhartmann.com. So check them all out at thomhartmann.com and hartmannreport.com.